to today's Scottish Police Authority meeting taking place in the offices of COSLA in Haymarket in Edinburgh. And a particularly warm welcome to Chief Constable Jo Farrell attending her first board meeting in her recently appointed starter capacity. Welcome, Chief Constable. Delighted to see you with us, and a full top team with you as well. Thank you. I have no apologies from members at all. It is a requirement we declare our interests and connections. Are there any declarations of interest or connections to make? Thank you. Can I confirm there are no other items of business except that which is on our agenda? Thank you. And in accordance with Section 20 of our standing orders, can I ask members to confirm their content to take the following items in private today? Item 10, which is to approve the minutes of our last meeting, and just to make clear now what we were discussing. Firstly, we were discussing the annual report and accounts, and they have been laid in Parliament and published, but we needed the opportunity to speak together before we laid them before Parliament, and it's an issue of courtesy that Parliament sees our annual accounts first, and they're not discussed in public before then. And secondly, we were discussing the arrangements of the interviews for the senior officer backfill, and those have now been made, and the staff are in post since we've done that, and that's been published too. The item 11 is discuss and make approval in relation to voluntary redundancy processes, so that has to be discussed in private, but no doubt they will be in due course be made public what those arrangements are. So are members content to take those items in private? Thank you. The minute from our meeting held on the 28th of September are with you for approval, and I've received one comment in advance under item 4 that the second bullet point should state People Committee Chair and instead of Resources Committee Chair. Thank you for raising that, Grant McRae. Subject to any further comment? I don't see any. I now invite you to approve our draft minute. Thank you very much. Going on to our rolling action logs, matter arising. 2 actions are proposed for closure. Can I ask if members are content with that? And I ask you to approve the closure of the action log. Thank you very much. Now I normally talk about decisions taken since the last authority meeting, and I can confirm that there have been no decisions taken by correspondence since the last authority meeting. Thank you very much. I now come on to my Chair's report, and I intend to take that as read, and I'll invite you to make any comment or questions you have. But firstly, I would like to acknowledge that this is DCC Fiona Taylor's last board meeting. And I've written a private letter to Fiona Taylor, but I want to say a few words for the record. Now, I know that DCC Taylor does not enjoy public expressions or professional admiration or appreciation. Nevertheless, she will have to endure these inadequate but heartfelt words from me and on behalf of the whole board and the authority. Your dedication, commitment and tireless efforts have left an indelible mark. Earlier this year, you gave me informal notice of your plans to retire in early 2024. I'm incredibly grateful for that very early notice you gave me. At the same time, you volunteered a clear commitment to lead and steer Police Scotland through the period between the retrial of the previous Chief Constable, Ian Livingston, and the appointment of our new Chief Constable. I was very grateful for that commitment, and it was yet another example of your wholehearted devotion to the interests of policing in general and Police Scotland in particular. You have worked tirelessly to successfully steer the organisation through all the challenging times over all the years you've been with us, for the unfailing support you gave to the former Chief Constable, Ian Livingston, and now the present Chief Constable, Jo Farrell. You provided a steady hand during moments of transition uncertainty and sometimes crisis in the past. Your strategic vision and unwavering commitment to upholding the highest standards of policing have been evident to all who had the privilege of working alongside you. Throughout your distinguished career, you have consistently demonstrated the qualities of an exceptional officer: honesty, professionalism, and a deep sense of duty to the community. Your ability to inspire and lead by example has left a lasting impression on your colleagues, the organisation, and the authority. So on behalf of the authority, I want to extend my sincere gratitude for your commitment and truly remarkable service. Your legacy will continue to inspire those who follow in your footsteps, and your impact on the organisation will be felt for years to come. There is no doubt, absolutely no doubt, you have made a significant professional and personal difference to policing in Scotland, and your presence will be greatly missed by both Police Scotland and the authority. Personally, and I'm almost at the end, Fiona, I also want to express my sincerest thanks and appreciation for your support to me and the board over the last 5 years. I have found it absolutely invaluable, and you have been a trusted colleague to me and to the authority. Your insight, leadership and candour has been absolutely remarkable and invaluable. As you embark on a new chapter of your life, I wish you all the happiness and fulfilment that retirement can bring. May you enjoy a well-deserved rest and relaxation, and may all the future endeavours you choose to do, and you will be in great demand should you choose to work or volunteer, be as successful and rewarding as your extraordinary career in policing. So thank you, and I'd ask the board to thank you too.
Chair, I would echo and endorse your tribute to Fiona this morning. Fiona is an outstanding leader with a distinguished career in public service with Lincolnshire Police, Lothian and Borders Police, Strathclyde Police and the Metropolitan Police Service. We should all be grateful that Fiona returned to policing in Scotland as a Deputy Chief Constable in 2018. She played a vital role in building and achieving the stability and improvement of Police Scotland during Sir Ian Livingstone's leadership as Chief Constable. As DCC for professionalism, strategy and engagement, Fiona has led the service through significant challenges and has relentlessly driven a focus on standards and values with immense personal integrity. On a personal note, I thank Fiona for her work as DCC designate, leading the service in the immediate period after Sir Ian retired and ensuring a smooth transition to my command. I'm grateful for her warmth in welcoming me to Police Scotland. On behalf of Police Scotland, I thank Fiona for her leadership, her public service. She will be a huge loss and sorely missed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would normally invite the recipients of this praise to speak, but unless she puts a microphone on, I know Fiona well enough to know that she probably would appreciate everything you said, but unless Fiona you'd like to respond.
Chair, thank you. Simply, it's been an absolute privilege to work with everybody in this room today and colleagues across Police Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Fiona to a T, you know, terse, clear, and get on with the business, please. Thank you so much, DCC Taylor, in a formal way, and Fiona, thank you for your friendship and your professional advice to me. Did say at the end of this, any questions for my formal report to you? Very happy to take them. Alistair.
Chair, it's not really a question, but hopefully it adds to Section 4, the Digital Justice and Policing Conference that you attended, and in it you refer to the Policing Performance Committee which I chair. So I really just wanted to expand on that slightly and explain where the authority is coming from and some of the work that we are doing with Police Scotland at this moment in time. So the authority has worked with Police Scotland to establish a rights-based pathway which ensures that the ethics and privacy are central to an evidence-led approach to proposals for new and emerging technology. Delivering through this framework, Police Scotland presented a paper at the June Policing Performance Committee meeting that provided details of technologies that the force is looking to adopt and that have been addressed using this rights-based pathway. These technologies included, as you refer to, the use of child abuse image database facial matching, the use of digital triage vans, and the use of specially trained dogs for search for hidden devices such as phones, laptops and memory storages. These technologies absolutely support police officers and staff to investigate crimes, and the authority will continue to have a lead, will continue to have a clear focus on the advocacy for and the oversight of the adoption and proportionate use of technology in Police Scotland, and that will go through many committees, but there will be a clear focus on it through the Policing Performance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And underpinning all this process from inception through to approval is a memorandum of understanding that we have between us and policing to actually deal with this in exactly that way you've described, Alistair, proportionate, legitimate and carefully. And I'm very pleased with this acceleration of the use of technology. When I was appointed chair, I told the parliamentary committee that was asking me about my priorities. I said my priorities are strategic police priorities. I don't have separate ones, but I have 4 attitudes. Improving the use of technology in policing, addressing, as we can, social justice within the policing areas, improving local oversight, and using all these through the lens of evidence. So I'm pleased with the progress. I expect, the board expects, and I know the Chief Constable expects, the introduction of body-worn video next year, and this is a significant step in policing where we are behind the curve, and I've said that. And in our discussions when we come to the budgets, we'll be looking to say our capital investment is very, very inadequate for the demands going to be in front of us. And technology, the use of technology will accelerate the capability of policing in Scotland and the capacity of police officers to respond to the demand. So thank you very much. And I was intrigued by what a digital evidence detection dog was, but I had a briefing about that, so thank you very much for that. I'd never heard of that. Are there any other questions for me about my report? Thank you very much. If I can move on, and now, as I say every board meeting, and I'll say it every board meeting, the scrutiny that is undertaken by the authority is not just at this board meeting. This is probably the most high profile, where we have the whole of the Chief Constable's team with us, and we will listen to the Chief Constable's report to us and talk to her about that. But these are the detailed works through our hundreds of hours of committees, and just to remind you all, they are live streamed, they're available on our website should you want to look at them, and we'll always be open to more information should you require them, and the papers are all published. So I'm going to go through the chairs of the oversight groups and the committees and start with Tom Halpin. Tom chairs the Policing Together Oversight Group. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. My report is before you. Just short commentary. We've had our inaugural meeting and the next meeting is within days. Building on what your previous comments, I'd like to pay tribute to the work in the area of policing together from Deputy Chief Constable Taylor and now being supported by Mr Spears. There's a great deal of integrity and authenticity about the leadership's approach to progressing this issue, which is of utmost importance for the Chief Constable and the senior leadership team going forward. It's early days in terms of our oversight of that work, but it's not early days in terms of the work that's ongoing there, and there's a very broad range of achievements that are already in place, and our drive is to drive it forward with pace and prioritise it, and etc. And there's a full commitment from the leadership team to doing that. The final bit is that we're about to receive the second interim report from the independent reference group in this matter, and their final report will come shortly thereafter. And I look forward to developing their reflections on the progress that's been made and testing it against those, that's what the test is the right word, of pace, priority and evidence of the impact of the work that's been done. So final again, just to reinforce the praise for the leadership shown by Deputy Chief Constable Taylor in this area.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? It is unusual for the board to set up oversight groups. We do them where we want a high degree of intensity over a critical strategic issue for policing. I chaired the oversight group into CALM, the contact management systems we were introducing into C3, and now grateful for Tom and the team to look at this issue of policing together. Just Tom, one question for me is, when do you expect to report? Is there an end time in your mind about how you report this?
We're talking about cultural change as well as process and policies being scrutinised, etc. So it's questionable whether we'll ever get to the end of this road. We initially looked at a time frame of 18 months to bring something tangible to conclusion for this group, and we unanimously doubled that right away when we started talking about the issues. So that I foresee that there will be interim reports will come from that group to this board regularly.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Jane Ryder, who chairs a policing negotiating board on behalf of the authority. Jane.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is not so much an oversight group, obviously, of the authority as the negotiating board, which involves all of those on the official side and the staff side for the negotiation of pay, the Scottish policy being committed to pay by way of negotiation rather than a formal pay review body. There's been a lot of progress since the August authority meeting. Indeed, we reached a formal agreement on police officer pay, which is set out here, and there was a joint agreement to commission independent research and review the options, benefits and risks in relation to potential wage growth mechanisms. I'm pleased to say that since that meeting there's been considerable progress on that front, and it's on track with the aim to have made significant steps with regard to the procurement process before the end of 2023. The other thing to highlight is that the period since August has seen the formal creation and launch of Police Negotiating Board Scotland, which is the statutory body in Scotland which succeeds the previous Police Negotiating Board, which was the relics of a UK framework and arrangement. The first meeting of the PNBS took place in October with a new chair, and the new chair is herself looking at current arrangements to be sure that PNBS is as effective as it can be, and whether any new arrangements should be adopted. And the other thing I'd like to highlight, because we gave a commitment to report after each of the Police Negotiating Board meetings. It's approximately 3 times a year, but because I think this is the appropriate and there being no other forum to report, that the Police Negotiating Board Scotland chair also has a role to chair what is called the Scottish Police Consultative Forum, a broader forum for effective consultation with key policing stakeholders on proposed changes to police regulations that are out with the remit of the former Police Negotiating Board Scotland, which is dedicated to pay. As I say, it's independently chaired by the PNBS chair, who's also looking at how this operates. The focus of the forum in recent months, given some detail there, perhaps highlight a particularly constructive discussion on the 22nd of November, so very recently, in relation to the HMICS vetting inspection, with the focus being on potential regulatory changes that will be required to implement aspects of the regulation. I think that's of considerable public interest. So that's my report.
Thank you very much, Jane. I had the privilege of meeting the new chair of the the Police Negotiating Board Scotland yesterday at the CIPA conference, where I was speaking with the Chief Constable. That's a police research conference, and I have a formal meeting with her set up shortly. So it would be a broad welcome to her. Interesting to have our own legislatively based negotiating board, and I'm pleased with this new emphasis on the consultative council, a more formal mechanism separate from all the informal mechanisms that we all have to discuss issues of change. And thank you to the board members who are on the Scottish Police, I should get that right, the Police Negotiating Board for Scotland. Thank you. The order is apparently important. So thank you for that very much, Jane. Any questions for Jane? Thank you. Can I go on to Paul Eadie? Paul chairs the Forensic Services Committee. Paul.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Just a very minor alteration to the report in front of you. It says that minutes will be available at our next meeting, the 4th of December. We don't have one now scheduled for the 4th of December. That was a hold date to sweep up any other business, so it will be at our next quarterly meeting, which I have not memorised the date for, so forgive me. We had an excellent meeting of the Forensics Committee I'm going to pick out 3 or 4 things from it. First, we had very good progress on morbid toxicology with a substantially improved performance on that. We also had a very good update on drug driving. Again, that's moving into a much better place. We're still outsourcing a bit, but the in-house component of that has greatly improved as well. We had a very good presentation from the Cold Case Review team, who have now been in existence for 10 years, and they talked to us about some of the work they did and highlighted the importance of their work to the wider justice system and getting strong messages across to people that you know about the work that they're doing. And lastly, we had an excellent session on new performance reporting, and this is on the back of a very good deep dive that we'd had prior to the committee, looking at the various project markers. So we're in a much happier place with that, much better place with that. We've got really excellent performance markers now. It's not 100% there yet, but I think we're almost there entirely. So a very good session altogether.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Paul? Just 2 things for me, Paul. Firstly, maybe the Director of Forensic Services might answer this. Parliament very recently extended the time limits from 6 to 12 months. They were at 12 months. They re-extended that 12-month period where cases have to be settled in court, which is very good news for Forensic Services. In looking to the future, how confident are you that when that does return, which eventually it will do, to 6 months, that we're set up and invested in Forensic Services to meet the new deadline?
Could I maybe pass that to the Director, Chair?
Thank you. So I am confident that with all of the development work that's been undertaken over the previous 2 years, and also the collaborative working across Police Scotland Forensic Services and with the Crown Office, that we are in a strong position to respond to the statutory time limit when that does reduce from 12 months to 6 months, which will be a year away from now, particularly with the Section 5A cases, a little bit more development work required for the Section 4 cases.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. And just the final comment is I did attend with the CABSEC very recently the formal opening of the morbid toxicology laboratory in Glasgow. And I say in my notes, thank you to you and David Page for their extraordinary work on Operation Weaver to bring that in and to hear from the operational side about how successfully that is going. And I was very pleased to see that laboratory. It's an impressive laboratory, and I'm sure if any board member would like to go there, I'm afraid all I do is go around asking how much did that machine cost, how much did that machine cost? And I'm always rather shocked when the figures go up to £750,000 of £1 million. but they are the modern process by which we have the black box of analysis going in by technology, and we have the human side of interpreting that and actually representing, where necessary, that interpretation in the court. And I was very pleased to be there with the Minister in this area, and the Minister on the law office side, who made a commitment to help your staff with any training they need when they're in court, to make sure that, and that was taken up with gratitude by your staff. So thank you for that. A very impressive meeting. I'm now going to come on to Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee, which is chaired by Mary Pitt-Casely. Mary.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, nothing much to add to the minute of that last meeting, although happy to answer any questions. But I did want to highlight that the annual report and accounts have now been published. As members are aware, the committee scrutinises these accounts during the drafting period and during the period of the audit. And we brought them forward to this authority meeting at its last meeting. And they were approved for submission. They've now been submitted. We did get a clean bill of health from independent external auditors. The accounts have now been approved, and they confirm that during the accounting year of up to 31st March 2023, policing managed its finances within the budget set by the authority. So happy to report that to members and answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mary. Any comments on that report? I wonder if this is the right time, or whether you want to do it later, Chief Executive, to make comment on the annual report and accounts, which we published and you made public comment on.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we cannot look at the accounts in public until they are laid before Parliament. That has now happened this week on the 20th of November. I'm pleased to report, as the Chair of the Committee has indicated, we have a clean audit opinion and there's no Section 22. This is a huge achievement for the whole team. When I say the whole team, I mean the joint SPA Police Scotland team who work on the annual report and accounts. I don't underestimate the amount of work involved, particularly when you have a new auditor. And during the process, the team had to deal with a few unexpected issues, but they were able to resolve them on time. I'd like to say, Chair, for the first time, we're also working on a short summary version of the annual report and accounts, which at present runs to 200 pages, so we want a shorter version that we can put on the website, which is intended to be much more accessible and a far shorter read. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm very pleased we're working on a shorter version than 200 pages. The diligent reviewers of this are through the Audit Committee, and very much thank you for that. And it is a diligent review, painstaking to go through that and then report back to our accountable officer, and then she takes the decisions about what is in there. So thank you very much to that committee. But to make them accessible, we must draw out the key points of that, the value for money, the balanced budget, the issues of where we think there are. And it's also important to try to capture the overall view that the authority has through my voice about policing in Scotland, and I give it a very positive view in my overall report. And I'd like that being clearer and more precise in how we think the successes of policing have been over that year and where we have agreed that the challenges of policing. And as all that top team know, and we know, there are no shortage of challenges, but sometimes we overemphasize those at the expense of business as usual, the huge quality. And when I was speaking publicly with the Cabinet Secretary and the Chief Constable yesterday, I reiterated the comment that in the HMICS annual report, we have outstanding operational policing in Scotland. My own view, and it's reported to me, we are Police Scotland is one of the top 2 national police services in the world. We have to say that. But that is not to be defensive, that we've got no improvements to make. The improvement agenda is extraordinary. We've heard some of it through Tom and the Policing Together. But that is not to say we're in a place which sometimes it appears some might be of constantly of problems. We are in a good place, but we should have the improvement agenda front and centre. And we say that in our annual report, and I hope we'll say that in more and more accessible form, because with all your diligence, 200 pages is quite a struggle to get through if it's not your specialist subject. So thank you, Mary, for your team. Can I come on to Katerina Casper? Katerina chairs our Complaints and Conduct Committee. Katerina.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have got two reports in a set of papers, and I will talk to the second report first. So the committee held a special meeting on the 28th of November to consider the evidence to be submitted by the SPA to the Criminal Justice Committee on the Police Ethics, Conduct and Scrutiny Bill. The authority supported the findings made by Lady Angelini in her final report. And my report highlights the four areas that our submission will focus on. In particular, our support for the inclusion of the proposals for the handling of complaints about senior police officers, which aim to simplify and enhance independence in the handling of these complaints, and which so far have not been reflected in the bill. The committee also met as scheduled on the 14th of November and covered, as usual, a variety of regular reporting and other items of business. In discussing the Police Scotland Quarterly Performance Report, we had a very candid and very helpful conversation of the extremely high demand being currently placed on the Professional Standards Department from a business-as-usual perspective, and also in supporting or leading on a number of really important initiatives within the complaints and conduct space, the Prevention and Professionalism Programme, for example, being just one of them. At the same time, we also noted that the number of complaints increased by 13% in the last quarter, which naturally further places an increased demand on the department. So as a committee, we explored the reasons for the increase in complaints and also what they might mean in relation to the service being provided by Police Scotland. And we also considered what the additional demand would mean for the complaints handling process, considering the existing pressures and a static workforce, which naturally requires a higher degree of prioritisation and a focus on the most material and serious complaints. And the committee was assured at that stage that matters around discrimination, sexual misconduct, misogyny would be prioritised. The committee also very much welcomed the HMSCS assurance review of vetting. I think the review highlighted, recognised the positive current practice and approach that Police Scotland take to vetting, which was very, very assuring to hear. And at the same time, the review also highlights some of the historic variances in practice that will require remediation, and the committee will remain close to the actions which will be taken by Police Scotland to address the recommendations of the review. I would like to draw attention to the third Complaints and Conduct Committee annual report, which has just been published, so it's literally hot off the press. And this report, it serves to highlight the trends in respect of complaints received during 22-23, and also the performance in respect of the complaints handling during that period. So it covers very much the assurance that the authority provides and the scrutiny provides in this important area. Over the last 2 years, the committee has strengthened its understanding and oversight of sexual misconduct within policing, with scrutiny taking place both publicly and in much more detail privately at the committee. And the committee is grateful to Police Scotland for its efforts to improve the information and the data that is being reported to the committee over the last year. As I've already mentioned, due to the detail reported, much of the oversight has taken place in private sessions. However, going forward, to build confidence in this important area, a priority for the committee will be to enhance public visibility of the insights and assurance that is being reported to the committee. And I know that this is a priority for our Police Scotland colleagues as well. I don't know, Mr. Spears, if you'd like to comment on your commitment.
Yeah, thanks very much, Katrina, and good morning, Chair. We are really committed to being very open and transparent in our publication of detail. You'll have seen that recently as we now publish conduct outcomes, and I've been very open at the board and at committees around the number of officers we have suspended, and I know the importance and the scrutiny that comes around sexual misconduct. So we have 65 officers currently suspended. 29 of those officers relate to sexualised behaviours. But really importantly, for the report, I will highlight at the next committee that this year to date, we have seen 31 referrals which have a sexual element to those matters. 9 are reported anonymously, another 9 are complaints from the public, and 12 are intern reports within the organisation. 22 of those matters are now progressing through criminal and conduct processes, and I highlight those figures because organisationally we want to be very open and transparent about those matters, and we will build that into the public narrative for the next committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board to Katerina? I think just one for me. I think it's implicit in what you're both saying is that were press reports which were quite disconcerting, that we had merged figures on sexual misconduct and therefore it was misleading. I'm grateful for that being in the public domain through that, but I just want a clearer response to that. I mean, I think that is implicit. Can we just directly respond to that issue?
Yes, absolutely. I think, you know, those reports, so the figures have not been merged intentionally in any way, shape or form. And in fact, as I say, as a committee, we certainly saw a really, really detailed breakdown. It's been such a focus. And I think what we've just heard is that, you know, we're absolutely committed to making the figures as transparent, as public as possible. So whatever happened in terms of, because the committee currently is still working with what is the best way to present data. So it can seem like something has changed, but actually the numbers have always been visible to us as a committee, and there's been absolutely no concern from my perspective that there's been you know, any attempt to make the numbers seem anything other than they are. And in fact, I think the numbers have improved from previous years. So I think 31 is a significant improvement, so to say, if improvement is the right word to use in this context. But it's a much lower number of complaints that fall within that category. And going forward, we will take extra steps to ensure that everything is as transparent and publicly available as possible.
Thank you for that commitment. Can you just respond yourself, DC Spears?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. So the purpose outlines some of those figures as our appetite to be really open and transparent, and I will build into our report a real clarity around matters that are causing great concern across the whole of Scotland. But a refreshed dashboard has maybe just inadvertently clouded a couple of those figures, but I think it's really important they were really, really clear, and that's why I wanted to emphasise those figures today. I wanted to emphasise our commitment to publishing conduct outcomes and talk openly about officers suspended because of behaviours within and out with the organisation.
Thank you very much. That's quite clear. The commitment and the intent is quite clear from that, and I look forward to those figures being in the public domain with an analysis of trends and the breakdowns as far as we can without breaching the confidence and waiting, of course, for the outcomes, as you said, of some criminal referrals too here. I think you said 22. What numbers going to criminal? Just remind the board.
There's 22 of the 31 matters reported this year, Chair, which are either in the criminal or in the conduct space, and we're progressing through them.
Thank you very much, and the committee will know the outcomes of those in private session, and if we can, if there's any learning from those, we'll put those into the annual report and into the public domain. Thank you very much. Okay. Can I come now to People Committee, which is chaired by Fiona McQueen.
Chair, thank you. Our most recent People Committee meeting was this week, but the one that I'm reporting on today was held on the 14th of November, and that was a particular meeting so that we could consider the People Strategy and Strategic Workforce Plan, which is a companion piece of the People Strategy. We were pleased, and I'll have the opportunity to say more later when it's a substantive agenda item, we were pleased to support the progress of both documents for approval here. The top lines are in terms of putting people's health and well-being at the centre of everything that Police Scotland does in terms of officers and staff, supporting leadership development and the culture, essentially, in terms of Police Scotland values. I'm particularly pleased to see fair work being prominent within that, and what was very reassuring for the committee was the engagement with the staff, formal staff side organisations and trade unions, who we were able to have pointed to us where the documents had been substantially changed with feedback from staff, which we thought was incredibly important. And I think the Strategic Workforce Plan, given where we are with changes in whether it's technology, society, numbers, is also a very important document. Neither we're ever going to be perfect, neither we're going to be in the absolute finished form, because by the very nature of the workforce we need to be iterative, and we're confident that we have that element of flexibility in that. Looking at giving the opportunity for the chief to look at the new policing model that's needed so that we can take that forward. One theme, and I'll come back to that in the substantive item of the agenda is about workload pressures and how we make sure that we provide an environment for officers and staff to flourish and be successful at work, providing a high quality service to the citizens of Scotland, but actually making sure their workload is such that it gives them meaningful stretching work in a way that keeps them healthy and gives them an opportunity to flourish in the organisation. But perhaps more of that when we come to the substantive agenda item.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Fiona? Just a comment from me. Now, there will be a substantive item on this. It's an incredible achievement to bring through the strategic workforce plan to get Fiona and her team's approval, although when she says it's not perfect, I would never expect anything to be perfect. I think that's a goal which we shouldn't aspire to. So thank you to Katie Miller for driving this through with her team, with our team, to the board, to this point where we're going to now discuss it with the endorsement, under the endorsement of that committee. Can't tell you how important that is, because that process underpins the change programme that the Chief Constable is committed to. How we have our workforce, how we analyse that, and what our people's strategy is. So just to reiterate to the Director of HR who leads on this and who will be before us, no doubt, to answer our more detailed questions. But thank you very much for that. We're almost there with the committee reports, but these are critical. So I'm going to come to Grant McRae, who chairs Resources Committee.
Thank you, Chair. The formal note of, or summary report of the Resources Committee meeting on the 15th of November is in the papers, and I don't really want to add very much to them, but I would like to say a couple of things. First of all, we benefited from having fellow board members from the People Committee, Fiona McQueen and Michelle Miller, at the meeting to contribute to a number of items in our discussions, so that was most welcome. The other thing I really wanted to comment on is the section on financial monitoring and planning. Although the Q2 financial monitoring report is considered as a substantive item later on our agenda, paper 9, we did have an extensive discussion on the challenges facing the organisation on revenue, capital and reform in the current year. And we just like to highlight that to achieve the requirements of operating in this challenging environment should not be underestimated. It's not just a matter of the finance team scoring the records of what's actually being spent and monitoring all that. The key thing is how it works operationally, and can the efficiencies that are being sought actually be delivered alongside the other challenges that are faced by our workforce throughout the year. But that's on revenue. On capital, we welcome the fact that the capital spend is now much more front-loaded to avoid so much being dealt with in the final months of the financial year. And we're at the stage now where happily no further capital commitments are required in the year. And the same really goes for reform. We're largely through the agenda, and it's very pleasing to see much more front-end loading rather than back-end loading. But happy to expand on that at section 9 of our agenda this morning.
Thank you very much, Grant. I'm sure we will. Any comment? Board members at this stage? No? And finally, the Chair of Legal Committee, Jane Ryder, Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This was one of our shortest legal committees on record, and all the better for it, because I think what I'd like to indicate is how much improvement we've seen over the year. At the beginning of the year, we said that our priorities were transparency, to be able to hold meetings in public for those items which could be. That's now happening. A degree more transparency to the committee members, so we had a better understanding of what was involved and the implications of this. Data, and you will see that's related to the transparency, you will see that there is work being progressed in relation to the data, the claims register. We're going to get more information in terms of category schemes, outcomes of cases to inform management action and management assurance to the committee, and lessons learned. And that's something we're going to look at in our development day at the end of a year's progress to see what lessons have been learned both from this process and from individual cases. And I might also mention, as the Chief Executive actually reported last time, we're doing some work, SA's corporate are doing some work on benchmarking the legal service to look at other forces and indeed other organisations who might be relevant. So I think we've seen a huge improvement in a relatively short space of time, if you think in terms of legal time. And the other thing I'd just like to highlight is that the committee saw in private assurance some very good and detailed, clear financial reporting on legal costs in the ordinary course of business, and commended management's activity to scrutinise and manage the costs down. So I think I'd just like to end on a positive note, which is not always the case with the Legal Committee, about how very positive the last few weeks have been. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Any comments, questions for Jane? Thank you. Concludes that item of business, and we now move on to the Chief Constable's report. As I said at the beginning, welcome, Chief Constable, to your first meeting. I'm going to hand straight over to you. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair, board members, colleagues. Really enthusiastic to contribute to my first board meeting, and I look forward to working with the authority to share how the officers and staff of Police Scotland are delivering for our communities, and find ways that we can better support our committed and professional officers and staff and improve the service to the public. My perspective as Chief Constable at Durham was that under the direction of Sir Ian Livingstone, Police Scotland became a highly credible public sector organisation known for its compassion. Police Scotland attracts huge public support and is highly operationally competent in meeting the well-being, crime and safety issues that concern the people of Scotland. And Scotland's National Police Service is very well regarded across the UK and internationally. There have been many clear successes: the policing of the COVID pandemic, COP26, Operation Unicorn, and the world-leading homicide response. These are a few of the things that have contributed to my view. And that view has been strengthened during my preparation for this role and since I took command. I've been meeting with officers and staff all across Scotland, and I've been highly impressed by the passion and commitment I have found. I've also met with key partners, including from the criminal justice sector and local councils, and it's clear the regard with which policing is held in Scotland. Police Scotland is a national asset for Scotland, and it is a privilege to be entrusted with the leadership of so many talented, professional, courageous police officers, staff and volunteers. I believe passionately in the value that policing brings to our communities, keeping people safe from harm, protecting the vulnerable, bringing criminals to justice, solving problems and reducing offending. We stand up for and with communities, and we strengthen them and we improve their well-being and allow them to prosper. I've placed trust, confidence and performance at the top of our agenda. I want us to be highly trusted by the people we serve. When the public call us, they must have the confidence that our service delivery will be of the highest possible standard. Key to delivering trust and confidence across our communities is our visible, engaging and proactive local policing teams. I want us to be willing to challenge ourselves so that we can continually improve and to be high performing. And as Chief Constable, my operational focus is on three areas. Firstly, addressing threat, harm and risk. Second, prevention, problem solving and proactivity. And third, looking after the well-being of our officers and staff. I will briefly highlight some examples of officers and staff delivering for the public and also outline my vision for Police Scotland. Our professional response to murders and homicides was underlined at the end of October, when new figures showed the number of homicides in Scotland were at their lowest level on record and that each one had been solved. This is a great credit to our dedicated murder investigators, our superb forensic science colleagues, and the strong relationship the public has with local policing officers, giving communities confidence to support and assist investigations. And I thank everyone who contributes to securing justice and answers for victims and their loved ones. A County Lines crackdown in October targeted drug dealers who exploit vulnerable young people and resulted in dozens of arrests. Illegal drugs with a street value of hundreds of thousands of pounds were seized. Officers were able to safeguard over a dozen young people, for example, tracing a teenage boy who had been reported missing from Birmingham and was found in Inverness. We work closely with communities and partners such as the National Police Chiefs Council and the Serious Organised Crime Task Force. Policing sends a clear message to those who peddle misery and death, and that their criminality won't be tolerated and they will be held to account. Policing's role in strengthening and standing up for communities was clear in our response to violence and disorder around Bonfire Night. A partnership approach focused on prevention supported a reduction in overall disorder and the number of assaults on emergency workers. But despite this positive overall position, there were pockets of disgraceful violence and disorder against communities and police officers and fire officers, and most notably in the Niddry area of Edinburgh. I thank and commend the courage, professionalism and resilience of our officers and our colleagues in Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, with 60 officers injured in the line of duty. I utterly condemn such attacks. Along with a robust public order response, we collected significant evidence during the disorder, and we opened a portal for further information from the public to identify those responsible, with a total of 23 arrests as of yesterday. We continue to problem solve with partners to prevent and reduce offending, safeguard communities and hold offenders to account. My written report also outlines policing role in the whole system effort to support, warn and inform communities during Storm Babette and the severe weather earlier in October. The extreme conditions, particularly in the Tayside area, were dangerous and challenging, and our thoughts are with the families who lost loved ones and those who continue to recover and repair from some of the worst weather in living memory. The multi-agency response to both operations demonstrated professionalism, bravery, and commitment in rescuing and supporting the most vulnerable in our communities. And I thank and pay tribute to all involved. At this point, I would also publicly repeat an apology for an error in judgment during this time. The train service I was due to take after work was cancelled. With my usual police vehicle unavailable, I asked my office to arrange for a car to drive me home to the Northumberland area. A colleague who had been visiting Police Scotland was also driven home in the same police vehicle. Having a road policing vehicle redirected to carry out this journey in those circumstances was an error of judgment. I apologise unreservedly to my colleagues, to the authority and to the public. Police Scotland's strong relationship with our communities has been evidenced by the good engagement we've made with groups from all perspectives during the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Protests so far have been largely peaceful. We continue to engage with those organising demonstrations to ensure rights to peaceful assembly and protest are protected, while minimising disruption to communities. I want to underline an important principle. Public safety is our priority. Hate crime, violence or abuse do not represent legitimate protest, and Police Scotland will respond to offending. Excellent policing, such as solving all homicides, preventing illegal drugs from reaching communities, and safeguarding those exploited by crime groups. Working with partners to reduce disorder and protecting communities when it arises, and playing our part in responding to a major incident are clear examples of the operational focus I require. I know the hard work, goodwill and commitment that lies behind this work. A changing, ageing population, a cost of living crisis driving vulnerability and pressure on other services, civil unrest, new laws and increasingly complex investigations all contribute to a growing community need and increasing contacts to policing from the public. Police Scotland must focus intensely on our core duties and what matters to the people we serve. If what we do doesn't protect the vulnerable from harm, prevent crime or support our officers and staff, we will challenge that and redirect resources to prioritise the front line. I know the challenges of delivering effective policing on a budget in the current financial year, including additional, unforeseen and unfunded demand around policing protests and sporting events such as European football matches and the increasing pressures from new legislation. The board has been clear that a balanced budget is a red line for policing in Scotland, and therefore I have written to the Chief Exec as the accountable officer, recommending that she write to Scottish Government and request contingency funding of £5 million of allocation in the current financial year. The ongoing and acute pressure on public finances brings additional urgency to the important principle that Police Scotland must be as efficient and provide as much value to the public as is possible. The case for spending to save to protect service levels has been made by Audit Scotland, by the Criminal Justice Committee of the Scottish Parliament, by the Cabinet Secretary for Justice, and this week by the Deputy First Minister. This is precisely what we are proposing in our budget today: spend to save. Policing in Scotland already has a strong track record of using investment in reform to protect service and deliver value to the public, and savings to the public first, and we can do more. In the face of austerity in 2013, police reform was an innovative and confident response to ensure Scotland remained a safe place to live and work. Police Scotland returns £200 million of savings every year compared to legacy arrangements. That's £2 billion returned to the public purse since Police Scotland was established, through significant reductions in senior officer numbers and police staff members, as well as through efficiencies and improved working practices. At the same time, we have historically low levels of crime, and people are less likely to experience crime than they were 15 years ago, and people feel safer. Ensuring Scotland continues to be a safe place to live and work is my commitment and a priority as Chief Constable. Without the changes of reform, policing could not provide the value we do within the funding available. Police Scotland is a successful example of government spending to save, and we can progress a second phase of policing reform to fully integrate the national service, become more digitally enabled and work even more closely with other agencies for system-wide efficiencies and better services. We will learn what funding is available when the Scottish Government publishes the 24-25 budget next month. High inflation and other factors have caused intense pressure across public finances. The Cabinet Secretary for Justice has been clear that not all asks in the justice system can be met. Our ask is for £128 million over and above flat cash, including an uplift to provide appropriate capital funding. This will allow us to restart officer recruitment for the year ahead, to fund the cost of this year's 7% pay awards for officers and staff, and make it credible over the next year, to enable a programme of voluntary retirement and redundancy, and to develop a new operating model that enables us to live within projected funding while maintaining service to the public. Without funding over and above flat cash, we will be unable to recruit police officers in 24-25. My experience in England is this would significantly impact on community policing and proactivity. A visible, accessible and proactive front line is vital to prevent crime and maintain the relationships and intelligence for enforcement and detection and for the fight against drugs in solving murders. Policing in Scotland has demonstrated that value to the public and the public purse can be achieved, and will drive our transformation and redesign further to ensure our structures and support services are as lean as they can be and allow as much of our resource as possible to reach the front line. I am clear that the responsibility for delivering effective change and improvement lies with me and my executive team, and I will ensure there is a shared focus and support for doing so. I also want to outline 3 areas where we can work with partners to make improvements which can protect services under financial pressure in relation to infrastructure, criminal justice reform and responding to mental health. We are scoping greater collaboration with Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, looking at areas where we can share services, and we are looking for more opportunities to accelerate our estate strategy and co-locate with partners, with more than 60 sites already in place. Plans for the next phase of our estate strategy and proposals on the disposal of properties, along with crucial public consultation and engagement plans, are being finalised. Many of these buildings are vacant or with minimal staffing and very low footfall from the public. Selling empty, rarely used buildings and those in poor condition can help us direct resources to where they can make the biggest difference. Our presence in communities is not defined by buildings, but by the officers and staff who work in them, and we have already introduced technology that enables our officers to remain mobile and visible in local areas, reducing the need for them to return to police stations. Second, policing is determined to play our part in criminal justice reform, to make efficiencies, but more important, to deliver better service for victims. Since taking command, I've met with partners in the criminal justice sector, including the Lord Advocate, the Solicitor General, the Sheriff Constable for Glasgow and Strathkelvin, and together we know efficiencies and improvements can be made. Policing will make appropriate use of direct measures at the lowest end of offending so that the entire system can focus on delivering justice in the most serious cases. And we will work with Scottish Government and the Crown Office to capture digital evidence, including on body-worn video, and share the evidence to support better and quicker court outcomes, ensuring justice is delivered for victims as soon as possible. And along with improved case management throughout the criminal justice system, this can reduce the overall overtime bill and officer numbers associated with court citations, which rarely result in evidence being given. We will take a proportionate response to crime based on threat, harm, risk and vulnerability assessment, and give those reporting offending, where there are no immediate lines of inquiry, clear information about the extent of the investigations and a quicker outcome, so that we can focus on preventing crime and responding to high harm. As we play our part, it's vital partners play their own part in achieving the Scottish Government's vision for justice. The practice of officers serving paper citations and repeatedly calling officers to court for trials that don't happen must be addressed to reduce cancelled rest days and leave and increase the time officers can spend in communities. And thirdly, policing must redefine our responsibilities in relation to mental health. Policing is highly trusted and people turn to us when they need help. We must respond to people in crisis, provide public safety and assurance, and to meet our legal duty to improve their lives and the well-being of the people of Scotland. It is an operational and legal obligation. But policing is not the best agency to provide people living with poor mental health with all of the care and support they need and deserve. We must reset the parameters of that legal duty, and we must find ways to provide the most appropriate help or to enable officers to return to preventing crime and responding to threat, harm and risk as soon as possible, after the moment of crisis has passed and that public safety is assured. Officers should not routinely be performing welfare checks or sitting in hospital waiting rooms for lengthy periods of time. I'm optimistic and enthusiastic by what can be achieved. Police Scotland has a track record of delivering innovation and ambitious change, and with support we can drive our own transformation further and play a key role in wider public sector reform. Our officers and staff are the key to our success, and today we will also set out how we will build a workforce that's the right size and shape with the right skills to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow. Our fantastic people are our greatest asset we have, and we will select and nurture and support them. And it's my responsibility and that of my executive team to support officers and staff, give them a vision, set clear expectations and provide the best modern equipment and technology so that we're in the best place to deliver for the people of Scotland. Last Thursday I was hugely grateful to join colleagues at the Scottish Police Federation's annual award ceremony in Edinburgh, and I commend and thank all award nominees and recipients. The awards shine a light on how many officers stand up for and with our communities, and I thank the Scottish Police Federation for their crucial work in supporting policing in Scotland. The bravery and commitment illustrated was inspiring and energising. The support and challenge of the Federation and our staff associations and our unions, and including our superb diversity staff associations, is vital and valued, and I've greatly enjoyed meeting their representatives since my appointment. I conclude their chair. I would just thank everyone at Police Scotland and from the authority for their support and professionalism since I took command. Scotland is a vibrant, beautiful country, and as I say, I'm honoured to be leading its police service. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Constable. And the board echoes your comments on the current success and future challenges of Police Scotland. And your priorities are quite clearly fully aligned to our joint strategy for policing. And your clear ambition for the next stage of reform and change to be backed by clarity and simplification of direction is very welcome around this board table. Before I open up your reports to comment, I want to recognise your apology for an error of judgment which you made to me personally at the time, and I welcome that you've repeated it publicly today to your colleagues, the authority and the public. As Chair of the authority, this matter was raised with me on Sunday the 22nd of October. I established the clear facts on Monday the 23rd of October, the following day, and I sought and I achieved a meeting with you on the Tuesday, the 24th of October, to discuss the issue in detail. The Chief Constable did not seek to justify her decision. She was unequivocal that it was an error of judgment, which she took full responsibility, as she's repeated today. She offered a full apology and assurance it wouldn't happen again. I am satisfied that the acknowledgement of the facts, the apology and the assurance given is clear. I am satisfied that there was a proportionate and swift consideration of this matter. I am assured, and the board can be assured, and I hope the public can also be assured, that this matter has been dealt with appropriately. So thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to open it up, moving on to board members to discuss your written report. And it does, as I said, highlight the significant challenge we're going to face together. So I've got a number of notifications in advance of questions. I'm going to go through those and open up to board members. So firstly, Mary Pitt-Casey.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Chief Constable, for your report and for the presentation of it today. I wanted to refer to Operation Moonbeam, which you pick up in your report and you referred to. This is the multi-agency response to the events surrounding Bonfire Night, when we saw some pretty disgraceful behaviour and some very regrettable assaults on officers and other emergency workers. This is a pattern every year now and something that we try to address, but this year in particular in the Nidri area of Edinburgh we saw some incidents which are very regrettable. We also, of course, in the last month or so have understood that one of our officers was attacked while responding to a fairly routine call for service in Ayrshire. She was stabbed, and I hope she's making a good recovery from that incident. So the question, Chief Constable, is what is Police Scotland doing to address assaults against officers and to minimise the impact when those assaults do regrettably occur? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Just to reiterate, both in relation to the incident and Nidri and more broadly, we as a team utterly condemn any assaults on police officers, on police staff or on any emergency worker. And we all know that that being assaulted is not should be part of anybody's job. We have a programme under the title of Your Safety Matters, and in a moment I'll bring in DCC Spears to talk about that in more detail. If I look at the data in relation to assaults on police officers and our staff, then that has reduced when we compare it against last year's figures. However, every single assault is one too many. And if I move to talk about our ambition in the coming year in relation to body-worn video, I see the deployment of body-worn video as a key part in our fight against tackling and addressing issues of assaults on police officers. My experience is that having body-worn video does impact positively on individuals' behaviour. It de-escalates issues of violence. There are always those individuals that will offer violence to police officers and staff, and in doing so we're able then to capture that evidence, and that has an impact as we move through should there be a criminal justice outcome. So body-worn video is a clear positive piece of equipment to deal with the issue of assaults on officers. Earlier in the week I was in Fife and pleased to see a number of the officers there also have taser. Again, my experience from England is that has a positive impact in people's behaviour and does impact in relation to reducing assaults on police officers. And I would want us to consider whether we can increase the number of officers who carry tasers in the future, should funding allow, and should officers be willing to do so, because it is their individual choice. So they're two key pieces of equipment and focus in relation to minimising the impact on officers. But I'll ask DCC Spears to speak in more detail around our programme.
Thanks very much, Chief, and thank you for the question, Mary. Officers continually put themselves in the way of harm, and it's been a concern that we've had for a significant period of time, and that's why we have in place Your Safety Matters approach to how we focus and draw attention on instances where officers are assaulted, unfortunately, at work. So we provide oversight through that forum. Every part of the force is represented, and really grateful for the support that staff associations, and in particular the Scottish Police Federation, would play in supporting that forum. Sitting below the forum, we also have a champions network. So we have leads within every division across the country, and what we are then able to do is for a forensic oversight of the instances where officers are the subject of assault, the circumstances that lead to the assault, the locations that they occur, and that broader environment. What this group's also been able to do is focus on what other things can we do to improve. So you'll be aware that we've enhanced officer safety training. We are driving some technology improvements around desk, around COS. That is very much about allowing us to keep officers on the street at vital times. And very importantly, we're looking at lessons learned. So we're comparing and contrasting data across all the divisions. And one anecdotal example, only last week at that board, we've seen the number of officers assaulted within police vehicles in Lanarkshire had increased quite significantly. So that allows us to have a closer look at the causal factors around that, and draw on some learning for other parts of the country. It also allows me to have a really close look at the welfare and wellbeing arrangements that we have in place to support our officers. So this is under continual focus. We're sharing best practice, and we're working hard to look at ways in which we can reduce the number of instances where officers are subject to an assault.
Thank you very much, and thank you for those responses. I think we would just simply want to join with you in recognising the resilience and the courage of our officers as they go about their duties every day. Not only our officers, but obviously all emergency workers who face similar challenges. And we do recognise that, you know, they are doing a difficult and often dangerous job. But I'm happy with the responses I've had in relation to the actions being taken, and commend that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. And just before I move on, your comments about increasing the use of taser, officers using tasers, the issue's been before the board in the past, and we have scrutinised those requests very, very carefully through Alistair Hayes' committee, People and Performance Committee. And as a result of that scrutiny and assurance, we've agreed to all the requests we've had in the past. So the board's approach to this is, if it can be demonstrated within our memorandum of understanding that it's a proportional response to a policing need, and it's consistent with the principles that we hold very dear in Scotland, and we are assured about the training for officers, you won't find, as in the past, a block from the board. But it's right and proper that that will be examined very closely, and we will discuss that with our stakeholder partners in local government, who in the past have been very supportive of the rollout of this type of technology and of other technologies. And I'm sure you'll connect with civil society organisations and bring back to Alistair's committee their responses, so we can have a balanced view about that. Just wanted to assure you that the board has no in principle, but we have our objection, but we're going to scrutinise this very carefully, and we expect that conversation with civil society to be conducted by yourselves and with civic society as well, but we will be taking a lead on this with civic society to engage and come to a conclusion. So I would welcome that coming through our system. Thank you for that. Excuse me. The next I have is Jane Ryder.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually a follow-on from this issue about public order. We've talked about the welfare of individual officers. Broadening it out, I just wondered if you could offer some comment or insight on public order, the public order trend. Is it stable? Is it increasing? And what the response is going to be? Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I'll bring DCC Connors in a moment, or maybe DCC Spears. Just to reassure you in the context of recent events and the impact of the Middle East situation, we have seen a number of protests over a number of weekends. We take a human rights approach in relation to our policing of those protests, and we protect the rights of those to protest and counter-protest as long as they are lawful and peaceful. It's a challenging area of policing, and I think the response by Police Scotland, colleagues in Police Scotland, our response in recent weeks has been measured and talks to the expertise and skill of the people on the ground in terms of being able to assess the level of threat and risk, and at the same time allow those peaceful protests in a democratic society and country. I'll pass over to DCC Connors. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Police Scotland's got a very long history of human rights-based approaching to protest, balancing the difficult rights of all of those who wish to protest, counter-protest, but also those who are going about their daily business. The public order commanders are very experienced. They lead officers on the ground who are also very experienced. And I think that's very key in terms of some of the decisions that they have to make. I think one of the key things that we've seen is, yes, we have definitely seen an increase in deployments. I think everybody will have seen that. We have seen more frequency around protests, particularly in response to the situation in Gaza. All of the 13 divisions have seen protest. I think that is something that is particularly complex about Scotland, the ability to deploy across a whole national country means that we are constantly moving officers about, cancelling rest days. It has a significant impact. But I think I would like to pay tribute to the style and tone that has been set around the protest, in that it's generally conventional officers, high visibility, high engagement, but low level in terms of seeing officers in riot gear, which we've obviously seen in other areas. So come to your question, yeah, absolutely, we have seen an increase in deployments, we have seen an increase in frequency. We haven't necessarily seen the increase in violence and tension that we have seen in other areas in the UK, and I put that down to the engagement with organisers, the style and tone of policing, and the experience of both the commanders who run these events, but also the officers that take part as well.
Thank you. That was extremely informative. Obviously, pleased to hear those positives. I wonder, you gave us some figures for arrests, I think, in relation to Moonbeam. 126 protests across the country in relation to the Middle East. Any, and I appreciate some are being investigated, but just what's been the response in terms of individuals held? I just was curious.
So we've had 20 arrests so far, which is a number that's still too high, but compared to others it is very low, for a range of offences, malicious mischief plus public order offences. So that's currently, and some are still obviously being investigated as we go through as well, so that won't be the total number.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane. In terms of public order, we had a very interesting public engagement process led by yourselves and DCC Will Kerr, actually, before COP26 for a range of civil society, journalists and others to actually get to observe public order training for your officers to ensure they are professional and that they are responding quickly to really complex situations on the ground. I'm not asking to respond now, but I would ask you to consider rerunning something like that, because I think that is of value for all of us in civil society, all of us out there, to be kept aware of the intensity of the training, but also what you mentioned before, the human rights approach to this actually makes decision making in some ways more complex, because you've got these, as you said, these 3 or 4 different interests to balance, but it makes it much clearer in public conversation about what you are trying to achieve. So I would like you to consider that. I attended that for half a day, and I found it very insightful for me. So thank you for that. My next question is Tom Halpin.
Thank you, Chair and Chief Constable, for your report. I welcome in your list of priorities in your report to preserve and strengthen the community policing model. And I'm reflecting on the ongoing initiative in the North East of Scotland, where low-level volume crime players are low likelihood of identifying a culprit, not receiving an immediate attendance. I'm reflecting on the area of antisocial behaviour, and we've had a big discussion in Moonbeam. And you know, if you are a resident in Nidri, antisocial behaviour is absolutely acute to you at that stage. And I think of retailers up and down the country reporting high instances of shoplifting now, etc. And this is about building trust and confidence. And we also see in the Performance Committee the recording of incidents of antisocial behaviour actually declining. But that doesn't feel like what it's like on the ground. And people on the ground, if they lose that trust and confidence, won't report it. And if we just take that as a blind marker of improved performance, we've missed the whole point. So that's my setting for it. So for me, this priority for citizens in ordinary, I mean, we'll always get an absolutely world-class service in investigating serious crime, etc. We recognise that. But for everyday citizens, this is really important. So this priority about strengthening the community policing model is really, really important. So I would ask you to give us a bit more insight into what you mean by that.
Thank you for the question. I'll start by just reiterating I've got a very strong commitment to frontline policing, and within that community policing, and experience elsewhere in the United Kingdom tells me that if policing withdraws from local communities, then it loses that ecosystem that enables us to both keep people safe and be effective in the way in which we deliver policing. So we do that at our peril. Your question goes to the heart of the ask of Scottish Government in relation to the budget for next year, 128 million pounds in order for us to spend to save. And what I mean by that is that we have the time to reshape and continue our reform of Police Scotland, so that we're able to deliver both those frontline community-based policing officers, and at the same time operate in the proactive and the higher end of criminality, so that it is that end to end. And what we're asking for and allows us to look closely at our local policing footprint and all of the services and the officers and staff that sit within that large part of our organisation. And I'll ask DCC Graham to come in a moment. In building Police Scotland and in building those national capabilities and some of our corporate capabilities, that's where the focus of the first 10 years was. Now we need, through the advent and development of technology, for example, a single crime system, we need to now look at what sits within local policing and look for those economies of scale, look for those efficiencies, look where we can raise what are our local services to either the regional or the national, to drive those efficiencies and ensure that we continue to have both front-facing neighbourhood community policing that deals with the antisocial behaviour, which, if you are the repeat victim of it, is very, very, very harmful. Very, very, very harmful. That we have those connections, that we can respond, that we are alive to those issues, but we can also operate at the high harm and high threat end of the business and keep people safe. So it talks to the ask today, and I know we'll move on to the budget in more detail, but our collective ambition is that we reshape and reform Police Scotland using and exploiting the technology so that we can deliver all of those services moving forward, or continue to deliver all those services. But I'll pass to DCC Graham and he'll add some more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief, and thanks, Mr Halpin, for the question, more for the recognition of the progress, I think the improvement in some areas in this space that we've seen against some of the changing demands as well. I mean, the first part is that we base it on evidence. So the heart of your question was, how do you strike a balance? Well, we've got an ever-growing picture of evidence and data about where the demand falls and when, and we can respond to that by redesigning services and deploying officers and staff in ways that are going to better match that in a more dynamic way. That needs to be done in engagement with local communities. It needs to be done engagement with key stakeholders, and we're committed to doing that and responding to feedback or learning that we get from that process as well. The Chief's already covered in her opening statement some of the capacity and demand issues that are going to be a priority, around about how we use our estate, how we make sure that we're investing in technology, spoken about the criminal justice system and some of the capacity creation that can come from more efficiency and effectiveness in there, and how we can better meet people's needs who have got mental health or well-being issues at the point that it comes to the attention of the police. Now, very good examples of things that will create capacity so that we can get that balance right into areas which at the moment in some places we are strained in terms of the speed or nature of our response, and I think we've acknowledged that during the course of this year particularly. But ultimately, it comes down to a redesign of an organisation that's going to be a different size and shape. And that work has been led through the Local Policing Service Delivery Review and the Modernising Contact and Engagement Programme, supported by all sorts of other work. Ultimately, those are the pieces of work which we're bringing forward, engaging the board in for a redesign of the community policing model, for the staff and response officer levels in different areas based on that evidence, and for the supporting functions that these individuals need to operate effectively. And that work is well in progress, and as and when it develops in different areas, we're starting with 2 pilot areas, 2 divisions that are representative of the diversity of Scotland, one Highlands and Islands, the other Forth Valley. That work's in progress, and we'll bring this through into the board as is planned at the moment, into different committees before it comes here.
Thanks very much indeed. Are there any other questions? Sorry, Fiona. Yes.
Thanks, Chair. I'm interested in following up, Chief Constable, about workforce wellbeing. I'm delighted to see that that's one of your priorities, but even listening to the passage of conversation from DCC Graham as well, I'd be interested to know what current actions have been taken to make sure individual members of staff and officers have a manageable workload. And because I think some of the feedback that we've been having in the People Committee certainly is there's an undue pressure on people because of the current resource system and also the increased demand from society.
Thank you for the question. So you've heard that wellbeing is a priority for me and the team working forward. There is no doubt that the reduction in police officer numbers has had an effect in relation to the pressure on police officers, and we can see that across the whole of the country. So that talks specifically to my drive around prioritising frontline policing. And when I say frontline policing, I don't just mean our response officers. I mean our community officers. I mean our investigators. I mean our staff and officers who are working around public protection. All of the people who are committed and driving that service delivery, and to ensure that people are safe. So sort of two elements. The ask in terms of the budget allows us to reform and reshape and put a greater emphasis around frontline policing, use the technology so that we alleviate some of that pressure. But in addition to that, I've talked about greater empowerment of our staff and officers, greater empowerment by our first, second line managers in people taking control of their immediate breadth of responsibility, and allow people to make decisions about how they reshape or change in the ways in which they are working. So I said in my address, if what you're doing doesn't directly impact on keeping the people of Scotland safe, ask yourself the question why you're doing it. And I think that it's really, really important that we put stat empowerment in the hands of our people. We've got really clever, brilliant, dedicated individuals, and they need the space and the permission to take control of their areas of business and challenge us in respect of, well, why are we doing that? Do we need to continue to do that? And like I say, some of the technology and the way that's developed will allow us now to move from the local to the regional or the national, create economies of scale. But we're really alive to that issue of the pressure that's currently on the front line of policing in its broader sense, and committed to addressing that. And I want to be able to say in the future we have returned X number of officers to frontline policing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more quick question. Katrina Stewart.
Thanks, Chair. I hope it's quick. My question really is, as you know, Chief Constable, I spent the last 2 days at the SIPA conference, the Scottish Institute of Policing Research Conference, Leading on from Tom's point and also DCC Graham's response, I've got a two-pronged question. So my first question is really around the role of research in addressing issues, for example, violence against women and girls. And I'm raising this question because the last 2 days very much focused on improving the delivery of justice, both in terms of the outcomes, but also the processes involved. And that leads me on to the second part of my question, which is really around, you talk in the section under priorities and operational objectives, and Tom's question around local policing. When you're talking about working closely with partners in terms of mental health issues and vulnerable people and so on, I just wondered if you could comment on the role of the third sector and more local lived experience informed and often directed now organisations, as well as some of the local policing initiatives in terms of addressing some of these issues, because what really jumped out of the last 2 days for me is that where there's a partnership between victims, lived experience, vulnerable lived experience, police, third sector and research professionals, then the impact can just be, well, the only word I can come up with is uplifting, but certainly incredibly positive.
Thank you for the question. I agree with you in terms of my presence at the conference yesterday afternoon and the depth and wealth of expertise that exists across that programme. Academics working with the authority and policing to examine where research can support policing policy and practice. And I talked a bit yesterday that you will heard in terms of my previous experience in that space. I think we can further exploit what was presented yesterday afternoon. And in driving forward further reform within the organisation, it's an area that we want to progress and grasp the opportunities and allow that local innovation. To you, and I'll bring Malcolm in a moment. But to your point around vulnerable people and connecting with in local partnerships and third sector. Loads and loads of examples that I've seen already. One that springs to mind is in the mental health space in Dundee, working with the local authority there and the trust, the health trust, to provide a local provision so that police officers, when supporting people in crisis, have that place to take them where they'll be supported appropriately, and that police isn't the first and last option at a local level. And that's where some of the solution is going to come in relation to our response or taking the demand around mental health away from Police Scotland. It's going to be in those local partnerships between local authorities, health and third sector. That is going to be part of the solution. But I'll pass over to Malcolm, who'll be able to give you some more detail in relation to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. It's a great question, and it gives a sort of useful opportunity to provide an update on the specific point about mental health and well-being and the demand it places on the police. We've mentioned a couple of times already, and a number of people from the SPA were at an event on the 22nd of November, Fiona McQueen as a member, and some of the officials as well, which we put an awful lot of work into making sure we got the right partners there. And I think it was a fantastic event. It had the third sector, voluntary organisations as well as statutory organisations, and it was there to examine 16 different services that currently the police are involved in some fashion in different areas around the country, whether at health board or local authority level. And members will understand that's a complex set of systems, but looking at what the roles and responsibilities were, how do we get from crisis into the care that people need, and the crisis response often falls to the police, but the care bit sometimes lands upon us, and we're not best placed to meet those needs. Coming out of that particular workshop, I think there's a real momentum that I haven't felt before in this space. I mean, we've had a number of national reports recently. We've had the Scottish Government Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy, which was published during the summer with some real clear commitments. We've had the Auditor General doing a specific report on mental health services, making comment about some inadequacies, and most recently HMICS did a thematic review on mental health demand on policing, which came to the conclusion that a whole system review is required, and that there is either unnecessary or unmet demand falling onto the toes of the police, where we can't necessarily best meet that need. So I feel momentum in this space. There was a really positive level of engagement about looking for solutions and answers to redesign different services. Our engagement and consultation in this space has improved dramatically. We're doing that jointly with SPA, but the functionality that we have in that space, our ability to engage meaningfully and have, real conversations with people that are going to result in services that improve, I think has been seismic over the course of the last sort of 5 years or so. And coming out of that, we will bring that back into the board. We're in the process of agreeing a pathway for how we can do that, but most in the nearest future that will be in response to the HMICS plan, and there's broader work that is surrounding that, specifically on that issue. So hopefully we can reassure you that we're in a very strong position with engagement.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the questions. Just one comeback from me, which is about the local policing service delivery review that DCC Graham mentioned. Now, we first had, as far as I remember, a presentation about this from when Will Kerr was the DCC, and he left in September, or before then, of 2022. Now, I've been privileged to have those. I've also been privileged very recently to have a presentation with the local scrutiny conveners to have that presentation about the in-discovery phase, which it still apparently is. We have a strategic partnership with COSLA, as you're part of that, and the commitment is to keep them involved. I'm not asking for a response now, but I would like this to come to the board at greater pace in terms of its commitment to make beyond the delivery phase. What are we going to do? Because I know when I speak to local partners in COSLA, and that's my commitment to being them, they are saying, they're talking about the slow attrition of their view of policing in their areas, which is not a good platform to be in at the moment. And I really accept the Chief Constable's focus on local policing as a priority, move to the front line. So if I could just ask for in a minute to be noted that I'd request that local policing service delivery review to come through the board, through its policing performance committee, wherever, at a degree of pace, because I think we're beyond where we should be, or behind where we should be at the moment. So I just leave that on the table, and thank you for nodding through that. Now, thank you for your first presentation, Chief Constable, to us. I really appreciate that, and the range of grasp of your portfolio that you have already. I'm going to call for a short break at the moment. If we can come back in 10 or so minutes, I'd be very grateful. Thank you. you very much. I'd now like to start again, and my sincere apologies. Fiona, I'd like to start again. My sincere apologies. We're running 15 minutes late. So those of you who would like to finish on time, take into account my apology and your responsibilities now. My sincere apologies. I would like to keep us to time. I'm now coming to the Chief Executive's report. Hand over to our Chief Executive, Lynn Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will take the report as read, but there are two areas I'd like to bring to the Board's attention that aren't in the report because of timing. The first one is the Independent Custody Visiting Service. ICVS colleagues attended the Independent Custody Visiting Association Awards yesterday in Birmingham, where the Independent Custody Visiting Scotland was received the Gold Level Award, a significant accomplishment with the challenging quality assurance framework. Achievement of gold status recognises the rigorous underpinning mechanisms supporting the scheme and demonstrates ICVS's commitment to maintaining a high standard of quality. Achieving this award required extensive work and input from the ICVS team, who provided evidence to support each outcome, and obviously a huge thank you to all our volunteers. I'd like also to move on to the UK Public Finance Awards. In 2022, the SPA Finance Audit and Risk Team won the UK Public Finance Award for good governance, risk management or prevention. And I'm delighted that this year the same team was shortlisted for Finance Team of the Year, central government and national bodies. This was the award that James and his team in Police Scotland won in 2022 for their work in COP26. And to have finance staff from the policing family in Scotland in the frame for such a prestigious UK award 2 years in a row is a significant achievement and reflects on their quality of work in the finance function. Unfortunately, we could not emulate Police Scotland. We were unsuccessful this year, but I would wish to commend and congratulate the SPA finance staff on being shortlisted. I thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions on my report and ask that the Board approve the Board and Committee 24-25 calendar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got a question firstly from Alistair Hay and then Fiona McQueen. So Alistair Hay first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your report. Chief Executive, this is in relation to Section 3, the Blue Light Collaboration, and actually the Chief Constable has already alluded to this in her report. And I'll just really, first of all, echo her words that what this is all about is working closer, looking at things system-wide, to ensure that we not only get greater effectiveness, but in these challenging times, greater efficiencies. We're still in the early stages of it. Asset reports there. We do a very robust procurement process. We've now got support coming in from PwC, who look at what services it is possible to share, and they'll produce an outline business case. I think really just two things here is there's a real openness about what the possibilities are and the approach that has been taken. Absolutely no conclusions have been drawn. There's an openness. And the other thing is that we've looked at all the stakeholders that are involved in this. That has been very clearly and helpfully mapped out. And by stakeholders, you know, we're thinking people, what people are affected by this. And what has to happen throughout this process is that we have very clear and very coherent communications. So there's a commitment, not just from PwC to engage with all the stakeholders, but also executives within Police Scotland and within the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service to speak to people within their organisations and wider stakeholders who would have a view on what is possible going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Hay. May I add my thanks to Alistair Hay for leading on the Board's behalf. In this Blue Light collaboration, I'd also like to emphasise that the funding for this project is part of the government's reform funding. It's completely separate from our revenue budget, and it is there for reform projects. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. My next is from Fiona McQueen. Fiona.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Chief Executive, for your report. I would like to commend the work that's going on. We've already heard about it from the Chief Constable, but on two aspects, the work that both officials in the SPA and also Police Scotland are leading on in terms of the response to the most vulnerable in society and how we respond to people who are in distress, and make sure that it's a person-centred approach and not necessarily hand over to other agencies, but make sure that whatever is needed, people have the right and appropriate support. And I've absolutely no doubt that the police officers and staff who do respond to people in mental health distress do so with empathy and compassion. But I think we've already heard today, and through the other wider work that we're doing, I think it's recognised that a more effective service could be put in place, and I'm encouraged by the work that's going on. And similarly, this time last year, we had a seminar on mental health and wellbeing of the workforce, and that's again incredibly important, the work that's taken place, both officials and staff and Police Scotland, looking at a whole system comprehensive support in terms of preventing mental health and distress amongst officers and staff, and for those who are affected, putting in appropriate support to get them back to full health as soon as possible. So it's work that's going on. I commend the organisations in doing what they're doing, and look forward to us moving forward with police to improving outcomes.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any other questions? Just to follow up then, just very briefly on Fiona McQueen there. 2 years ago, I made it a priority for the board to look at mental health in policing, because it's an issue around capacity. If police officers are kept unnecessarily in hospitals or elsewhere, it means they can't, as the Chief Constable said, be elsewhere. But it also says, that I said at our conference on this, Fiona, to frame it as there is a role for policing, finding the appropriate role for policing, because the public looks to police 24/7, 360 to respond. They don't know what's going on. They don't diagnose. They don't know what's wrong with the person. I think it is important. So whilst I can take no credit for the changes that are coming, I can take a great deal of pleasure in the fact that I asked you to lead this 2 years ago. I asked the team to be really concentrating on this, and I'd just like our own team watching this to put maybe in the Twitter feed our own report with Police Scotland on mental health. It tries to frame it as work in progress. It tries to frame it as there's an appropriate and clear role for policing with vulnerable people, but there's also a dearth of places that vulnerable people can be supported through that crisis. And it's also an acknowledgement that when people are placed in a place of safety, quite often the mental health service is months, if not a year and a half away. So there is an issue there. So thank you for all those who work so hard on mental health. As I said, take a great deal of pleasure in the way this has come to the fore. I would like it at greater pace, as always. And to you and my own team within the SPA, who have been behind the scenes working that way. So if we can put that public briefing on our Twitter feed, I think that would just give people who have an interest in this a perspective. It's clearly a few months old now, a perspective of how we've analysed this problem ourselves. So thank you very much. Is there any other comments? Yep.
Chair, you just have to approve formally the board and committee 24-25 calendar.
My apologies for that. Thank you very much. Can I ask the board to approve the calendar for 24-25? Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to come to agenda item 7, the Forensic Services Director's Report, and pass over straight away to Fiona Douglas, our Director for Forensic Services. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take my report as read, but highlight a number of areas within it for members. Forensic Services continues to be on target to deliver a balanced budget for this financial year, and I am fully aware of the pressures on the justice budgets now and in coming years, which is why we are moving forward at a slower pace with our organisational change within Forensic Services than originally planned. We continue to look for efficiencies and to deliver an efficiencies plan for Forensic Services, which allows us to identify savings to invest in delivering the new operating model for Forensic Services. Moving on to HMICS and the review of forensic toxicology provision in drug driving. There is substantial good progress that was reported to the Strategic Oversight Board in relation to the recommendations raised by HMICS in this review. There is an enormous amount of work going on across here, PFS, Police Scotland, and within Forensic Services and the Scottish Government to look at addressing the recommendations that HMICS have raised. There's still a lot of work to do, and in particular work to do around agreeing a sustainable long-term solution for drugs driving forensic toxicology provision, which meets the needs of Scotland, and in particular will allow forensic services to service the analytical demands from Police Scotland. In November, 5 men and 3 women were found guilty of abusing children, believed to be the largest prosecution of a child abuse ring in Scotland. This case shows the enormous demand that such a complex investigation can have on forensic services provision, with teams in almost every part of forensic services in each different discipline of forensic science involved in providing results to support the Police Scotland investigation and the Crown Office prosecution. It also raises for forensic services some wellbeing concerns, with so many staff having to deal with and understand the impacts of such abuse. There's no doubt that dealing with such a case leaves a mark on everyone involved, and we need to reflect and remember when we ask staff to carry out this type of work. I was delighted to welcome the Cabinet Secretary for Justice and the Drugs Minister to the formal opening of the new post-mortem toxicology lab in Govan. This is an essential service for the people of Scotland, and this has been secured thanks to a £6 million investment by the Scottish Government. I was very pleased that the SPA Chair, as well as the Chair of the Forensic Services Committee, the Solicitor General and the Head of Roads Policing in Police Scotland were among guests at the opening, and it was, I think, a really successful tour through the laboratory facility and lots of really insightful questions and comments from everybody that was involved. So thank you very much for supporting the opening of our new laboratory. In the Forensic Services Committee meeting in October, the committee approved the new performance framework for forensic services. This is a substantial piece of work that has been delivered over several months, and it really sits hand in hand with our new Memorandum of Understanding, which I reported into the last meeting of the authority. And I think it really does set out some clear performance indicators and will certainly help to shape the performance reporting and to further develop that for the Forensic Services Committee moving forward. On the 29th of September, we undertook the inaugural Forensic Excellence Awards in the University of Stirling, and the variety and scale of the awards gave a really good insight into the important work forensic services staff do every day. It was a great day to celebrate all of their achievements, and we will be making this an annual event in future. So again, I'd like to thank members of the authority that were able to attend that day, and the Chair of the Forensic Services Committee in particular for sharing his remarks to staff. The new logo and branding for Forensic Services has now been launched, and that was launched at the awards ceremony. And I have appended to my report today the annual review for the last financial year as an appendix, which shows the new branding, but also a new approach to communications and a good summary of some of the key achievements of Forensic Services last year. And finally, I attended the International Science in the Interests of Justice conference in London, hosted by the Royal Society in October. That was a really exciting conference, really, to look at emerging themes being developed or under consideration in terms of innovation in science and across the justice sector, and really how that science can be dealt with through the court system. That included representatives, particularly from across the United Kingdom, but also colleagues in the United States, which posed an interesting comparison of the different approaches to how science is presented in the courtroom. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Director. Now I've got 2 board members on my list. Open up after that, but firstly Jane and then Paul. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 questions, and they're both in the category of so what next. And one is in relation to 1.3, the working with partners in the Scottish Government Police Scotland and the Crown Office to create a long-term sustainable model for drug driving in Scotland, and so some sense of timeline and what's the next point of key consideration. And then in a slightly different area, 1.13, which is around the difference in forensic regulation between England and Scotland, and you refer to that as there being a potential risk of a potential different perception. So again, what next in terms of how to mitigate that risk and address that? Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. So I'll take your second question first in relation to differences in forensic science regulation. So the new forensic science regulator in England and Wales, his codes of practice and the initial forensic science activities that are included in that code of practice went live just early in October of this year. So it's very early days in terms of how that code of practice and how that new regulation will be applied within the complex forensic science world in England and Wales. Within Scotland, we are accredited. We've got one of the broadest scopes of accreditation to the international standard of any forensic science organisation, and we continue to be committed to accreditation. Whilst the new code of practice does not apply in Scotland, we are undertaking a gap analysis to assess the gaps between that standard and what potential compliance could look like, and understanding where those gaps relate to the different legal system that we have here in Scotland, or whether there is further development work that Forensic Services needs to do to be able to demonstrate compliance in the future, should collectively we seek to again restate that voluntary compliance where possible, which is the position that we've taken previously. So we will watch and see how the forensic science providers and the police forces in England and Wales respond to that new regulatory framework, as well as how the forensic science regulator himself will deal with areas of non-compliance and manage any risks associated with forensic evidence in the courtroom. With regards to the long-term sustainable model...
Sorry. I wondered if I could just think that that's very helpful indeed. Could we have at least, because there's no timeline there, an assurance that you will report at least on an annual basis, or as matters develop, whichever is the sooner, so that the committee have sight of this and the board have sight of this?
Absolutely. I've provided 6 monthly updates up to date in terms of the development of the new code of practice, and I will continue to update the Forensic Services Committee on the gap analysis. With regards to the long-term sustainable model for drugs driving toxicology services, it's clear that there are some of the HMICS recommendations that will inform a wider strategy, and particularly the levels of demand that we would expect to see in relation to drug driving toxicology requirements in the future. And I think that work needs to happen before the long-term sustainable model full business case, which is the next key stage of development of that, can be initiated. So that work is ongoing as part of the Strategic Oversight Board for the HMICS review. Conversations with Scottish Government continue in the meantime in relation to the long-term sustainable model. In addition, Forensic Services are working up a toxicology strategy which considers the interoperability between post-mortem toxicology services and drugs driving and criminal toxicology more generally, all of which I think are critical to inform the future long-term sustainable model.
Again, I don't mean to be hypercritical when I say there isn't actually a date or a timeline in there. I absolutely applaud the intention and the direction, but some sort of timeline, or at least, again, some sort of assurance that this will be reported to the Forensic Services Committee, or indeed the board, ongoing.
Can we just, thank you, Jane, can we just ask Fiona to come back through the committee to give the timeline, and then the committee chair can then assess that and report to the board about clear or not. Thanks very much. I've got Paul Eadie and then Grant McRae.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Firstly, many thanks again to your staff for their warm welcome at the opening of the new morbid toxicology labs at Muir Park. It was an excellent occasion, and this has been a very complicated transfer. These things are never easy to do, but certainly the warm welcome that ministers and Martin and myself received from your staff, the enthusiasm, excitement and pride in the new labs really shone through on that day. So if you could pass on our thanks again to them, that would be terrific. My question is on the budget and the revised operating model. I note that the budget for this year is online to be balanced, but I'm just still curious to tease out more on 1.2 about how you see the new operating model being delivered with projected revised budgets going forward, and if you can maybe flesh that out a little.
Thank you, Paul. So the implementation of the new operating model for forensic services has progressed well this financial year and will continue to for the remainder of the year ahead. There's been a number of substantial milestones that have been met. We did not receive the investment that was approved for the full business case, all of the investments. However, we have delivered efficiencies in forensic services and will continue to support the implementation of that new operating model. So the direction of travel is absolutely clear and is as described within the business case. However, the benefits realisation will be slower as a result of that need for a self-investment approach given the current economic climate. So the service is progressing with the implementation. However, we will not be able to bring on the additional new posts into the next financial year based on the current financial pressures and challenges. However, there's an awful lot of work still to do to bed in the changes that we have already made and to deliver the improvements which we expect to see as a result of that.
Thank you. Marking Grant and then Mary to put your question.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to congratulate Director Fiona for the excellent Forensic Service Excellence Awards in September. It was really great to learn a lot about the innovative work that's been done by so many of your team, and to see these being publicly recognised. It was very visible to see the boost that gave to morale for everybody in the room. So well done, and I'm delighted to hear it's going to be an annual event.
Thank you. Mary, potentially.
Thank you very much. I also wanted to offer congratulations on the completion of the laboratory at Moor Park. It seems like no time at all since you brought the proposal to us for approval, and for it to be opening already is quite an achievement. It makes a refreshing change not to read about overspends and long delays, so well done. That's a good achievement.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions. Just one comment from me. You talked about increased communication to the public, which I have been very keen to press you on more. And the reason for that, a number of reasons, that effective advocacy for us into the budget holders in this area do require much greater public visibility of the range, depth and value of forensic services, and thank you for moving that forward. The value to police service for the investigations and the value to the prosecutors for the prosecution. And I say the same thing about the work of the Scottish Police Authority, Police Scotland and yourselves. There is an appetite to learn more about what each of us does. More so, I think, in Police Scotland, of course, but also in what you do. And I know that you planned some presentations within Parliament, and I know that's been discussed with our Police Scotland. I think it is absolutely right, as we always intend to be as open and transparent about the technology that we are using, you are using, about the operating systems you're operating, your training, and your ambitions. So the more we can do that, the more we can engage the public. So I'm just making that point. You've moved a significant way in the last year, and I'd like to see that accelerated in forensic services. Police Scotland already do have a very good communications and action issue. They are very open, and there's a lot of demand to see more visibly and more tangibly. People not surprisingly, I would do the same. What does a road policing car look like inside? I know these are low-level issues. What exactly is C3, which we talk about? My own family are baffled when I try to remember this. And there's an open invitation at all the meetings I go to with local government scrutiny. Please come and see us. Please come and see what that command and control centre looks like. If we have more visibility, we draw people in to the work that you're doing and we're doing. So thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to move on, if I can, to agenda item 8 and welcome Katie Miller to the board table. Katie Miller is our Director of People and Development. I hesitate to say recent because it's not quite recent, but it's great to see you here, and thank you for all the work you've done already. And I mentioned that the pace you've got this and through the committee it is really important to emphasise. A hugely difficult job. So thank you, and you're going to present this paper.
Thank you. I'll take the paper as read. I think this 3-year strategy gives us the opportunity as an organisation to articulate how we're going to support our people. It talks to the opportunities we have, but also some of the challenges we have. This has been a collaborative effort to develop this document. Whilst I sit here and speak to it, it's not my strategy, it's our organisational strategy, and it's had significant input from various stakeholders, including our staff associations, trade unions, colleagues. But actually I'd like to also take the opportunity to thank Fiona and the People Committee, who have worked tirelessly with us since we started this to make sure that actually where we were getting to met the expectations of our People Committee. I think that what the strategy does is it articulates, or it seeks to articulate, that we have a strong platform to start from. We have the building blocks in place in many of the areas of our people agenda, but what this looks to do is to try and bring everything together. It's an expression of our culture and our intention towards our workforce. We know the challenges ahead then become about how you take that expression into the lived experience of all of our colleagues. I'll close on that, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to bring Fiona McQueen back in to give us the advice that her committee would like to give to the board on this issue.
Thanks, Chair. And I'd just like to echo your thanks to Katie. This has not been easy, and because it's so important, everyone, I think, would like the opportunity of improving it and polishing it and waiting. However, there is nothing more important than the health and well-being of our workforce, and obviously creating the workforce of tomorrow is something that we need to have strategic plans in place, and therefore when we had the committee meeting we were pleased to endorse it for our approval. We have had a lot of work. It's been responsive to, I think, making sure that there is an absolute intention of putting people first, no matter how difficult that is. I think there will be challenges, whether it's financial or being able to recruit or an ageing workforce, but all of these, I think, are clearly articulated. We're working on looking at outcomes so that we can measure. So what difference will it make to people? Making sure that we have a good dashboard, good workforce information, and trying to be stretching so that we absolutely can have the service that we're proud of. So it's been a lot of work. The team have responded to our additional meetings that we've asked for. There is no doubt that People Committee is all the richer by our staff associations and trade unions being present with us and being able to offer comment and advice. And it has felt quite a collaborative exercise, and we were happy to commend the reports on the basis that it's iterative, and we will look at continuous improvement and measuring outcomes to make sure that we're delivering on the promises.
Thank you, Fiona. And before I come, I've got Katrina that wants to come in. Just to be clear, because we've been through this process a number of times, marking the draft strategic workforce plan out of 10, it's always a kind of, I'm not too sure about it. I mean, I'm not a travesty. But we've always slightly withheld our consent to it. I think both helpful and unhelpful. I just need to know when you say, which I think you have said, this is as good as it can be, and it's a waste of effort to try to make it better or perfect, because actually that's not the purpose of strategic workforce. Not to have a perfect plan, is have good enough as a vehicle for the changes that Chief Constable is seeking to bring through, with the professional support and clarity of purpose and just kind of set that out. Maybe I should just turn to Katie first, because I think what you've got here is more than a pass mark. What you've got is this is as good as it can be. Is that 2-1 or whatever we've gone? You know, just tell us, and I'm going to get, because it's very important to me not to go round the roundabouts about saying, well, actually, it's not the platform to give stability for the change. Could you just come back on that?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm not going to mark my own homework, but I think what I am going to say is that all of us are keen to start this. And I think as an organisation, or any organisation, both people's strategies but also strategic workforce plans, there are so many moving parts. So whether that's internal dynamics, external, we look at budget factors, scenario planning, etc. There's a piece from me, and we've been talking to Fiona and the People Committee about this, about committing to paper what it is we want to do for our workforce and starting that journey. And then it's an iterative process whereby we continue to stretch our ambitions. We have evidence-based outcomes. We know we've got more to do in that space, but actually we respond to our workforce. So if there's something in here that we're not prioritising and we're hearing from our workforce we need to, or indeed there's something we've missed that we find out later on in the journey, we bring that in, we learn, and we keep on improving. So, from my perspective, let's start. There's so much that we can do for our workforce, and think about our plannings in alignment to the Chief's commitments and where we want to go. So, I think this is good enough now for us to start that journey for our workforce. Thank you.
And I think for me, the saying "perfection is the enemy of the good" applies to this. So one very real example is our staff organisations have raised concerns about the Your Leadership Matter, the training. So seeing how fundamental leadership skills are to the success of the service and recognising that. The offer has been an online training, and there has been concerns, although there's some evaluations that where it's evaluating well, but what we've absolutely had from the executive is a commitment to review that, see how we can try out and test face to face and make ongoing improvements. So I think to almost have been paralysed by trying to get the perfect document would have prevented any ongoing movement, and I think that's where the committee took that on balance view, that there were absolutely the commitment, that the words, the progress, and it's about learning and improvement in an environment that is about people and taking that forward.
That's very clear, and I wanted that to be kind of on the table and very clear. Otherwise, we'll keep on regressing back to this is not perfect, this is not perfect. We've just said 80-20, good enough. Thank you very much, and thank you for your work. Got a question here, a question of Katrina Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to try and take the position of second marker, so please take as read. I absolutely appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and I also take on board the need to start implementing it. I do feel I need to raise something that will not be a great surprise to lots of people around here, because they've heard me talk on this subject before, but in your forward, Chief Constable, you talk about Ian Livingston's statement, and I was there when he made that statement, and I asked him at the time if he could make a commitment that in terms of discrimination, he was including the disability, and that would include the so-called hidden disabilities. And my question then is, I would like to ask what cognizance there is in regards to some of the concerns that have been raised in a recent report by DACA, Disabled and Carers Association, around reluctance to disclose and other anxieties around some of the processes and institutional structures that may disadvantage disabled people.
Before you answer, it'll be quite clear that this is a conversation about a strategy. And if there are concerns about practice, quite happy to have that addressed in short here, but I'd rather the practice was addressed through the People Committee, through the evidence of what's being said, because we are being asked to address a high-level strategic approach. So can I just very happy for you to attempt to answer that question, but that's not actually what's before us. But there's an issue raised. Would you like to answer it?
Am I allowed to? Can I come back on that? The reason I raise it is because in the document it talks about gender and it talks about ethnicity. So there are specific groups of people being highlighted in this document, and as I keep saying, when people are not mentioned, they don't get thought of. So I understand this is a high-level strategic piece of work, but I'm still quite anxious that disability is not mentioned in that.
That's a fair enough point. I want you to answer that point about visibility, please, rather than practice, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you. And I think, you know, the point that you raise around reluctance to disclose is a very valid one. And it's not just something that we would see and feel in our organisation, in Police Scotland. I think we would recognise across a number of organisations that there can be that reluctance. And actually what's at the heart of that for me is culture. It's around trust. So do you trust that what you are disclosing will be treated in the right way, that the data will not be to detriment, etc. So yes, there's the mechanics and there's the process around that data piece, but it comes back to culture for me. So I think I'd like to reassure you that, you know, within one of the stated outcomes in the people strategy, we talk about a strong sense of belonging in the organisation. And there's a difference for me between that sense of I'm turning up to work to I'm turning up to work and I feel like I can be authentic, I can be myself, and I feel that I belong regardless of what I've disclosed or how I'm showing up. So please be assured that we've absolutely going to incorporate that in our work. Thank you.
Do you want to come back?
This is a strategy, so I accept that. I still think there will be processes that need to be put in place and identification made and visibility and all those things that will allow everyone within Police Scotland to come to work feeling they can be their authentic selves and delivering their best authentic selves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katrina. Fiona would like to come back in and I'll go to Caroline.
I think to see as the People Committee, when we're looking at outcomes, then we will certainly make sure that we're measuring that and we'll look explicitly for all the protected characteristics, including hidden disabilities, so that we can see a demonstration of move towards eradication of discrimination and that people can be themselves at work and are supported and reasonable adjustments are made.
Thank you for that commitment, Fiona. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Caroline, then Michelle. Caroline.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Katie, for your strategy. I just want to say I've been here for 7 years and I think this is the best piece of work I've seen, so I just want to commend you for that. And the best bit for me, personally, is the fact that it's got an action plan in it, which we've never had before. It has owners and attached to the actions. The one piece that's not quite there yet is the timelines, and I just wondered when you'd be able to commit to putting timelines in, because that's the things that drive a strategy into an actionable document that can be embedded across the organisation. So that's really important. My second question, the Chief Constable has been quite clear about a performance-driven culture, and I'm just wondering how you plan to embed with this strategy that culture across the organisation. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I take your second part first in terms of performance, I think we recognise within the implementation plan there is more work to be done. We know that. We've put some measures of success in, but we know now if this is approved today, there's work that we need to do over the next kind of 4 to 6 weeks on taking some of those measures of success, theming them against strategic outcomes, and then getting to the evidence-based assurance that you look for within committee and within board. So we know there is that piece to be done. More broadly, I think there's opportunities for us to look both in terms of benchmarking. There's a lot of benchmarking that we could be looking to, so that's both in terms of whether it's within the people strategy or in the strategic workforce plan around organisational costs, our organisational design, service costs, efficiencies, productivity, etc. But are there also some very key frameworks that we can draw upon? So, for example, in Patrick for learning, so that we're making sure that we're looking for the evidence base of cultural mindset, behavioural change, and even looking at some of the further inventories, for example, around Maslow, so that's kind of looking at burnout in the organisation. So there's more work that we need to do in that evidence piece. But we've made a commitment with our performance unit to do that both for the people strategy and the strategic workforce plan over the next 2 months if it's approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Caroline and Michelle. So you finished your question? Michelle.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for this document. And I have to say, I think it's better than a pass mark. So I've probably been part of the frustration historically in terms of what we've seen and that hasn't necessarily matched what we hoped for. We perhaps weren't very good necessarily either at saying what we wanted, so I can get that caused some frustration and difficulty. But I just wanted to, I suppose, emphasise the point about this is good enough now, but it's an iterative process. And for me, it's as much about making sure that we are freed up in our thinking, that we won't always be kind of recalling ourselves to the 30th of November when we approved a document and say, well, we've got to do that because it's in that document, and make sure that everybody is encouraged to think creatively, because hopefully, and I do have confidence in this, the issues that we know we need to address in relation to culture, in relation to performance, a whole range of things, will improve over time, and we would want to set our bar higher and higher at each point, which would then allow an adaptation or an evolving of this document to match those increased expectations. So I think we should, well, personally, I'm very happy to support it and to welcome it, but to look forward to it changing and evolving over time as well.
Thank you very much. Are there any more comments? So, flying colours. Does the board approve this strategy, these strategies? Thank you very much. Thank you to you and your team for this. It only has a value as a strategy at all us if it actually makes a difference. I am really, really ambitious for the difference it's going to be. It's going to underpin a lot. And through your leadership in HR, I'm very confident we're going to get there. So thank you for that. So thank you, board. I'm going to come to item 9.1, Financial Performance Quarterly Report. It's been through the Resources Committee. I'd like to come to Chief Financial Officer James Gray first.
Thank you, Chair. And as you say, it's been through committee, so I'll be fairly brief in my comments. I'll focus around slide 2, which is the finance dashboard. And the first point I'd like to make is just the journey we've travelled on from where we were at quarter 1. At quarter 1, when we were at the Resources Committee, we were forecasting an £18.9 million overspend at that point in time. A mitigation plan was developed and signed off by the executive team, and the main actions are set out on slide 8, but are also on the dashboard on the right-hand side. And what I would say is there's been significant progress over the last 3 months with regards to delivery against that. We've seen an awful lot of organisational effort and a lot of leadership, and right across the organisation a lot of hard work in order to try and bring the budget position back into line. At quarter 2, at year to date, we are £7.7 million over budget on the revenue. We are forecasting at quarter 2 that we would break even based on the delivery of that delivery plan. You can see, just by a quick look at the colours on it, there's a lot of red and orange on there, and we have at period 7, having just been through Resources Committee with that recently as well, reviewed the position at the end of October. And there remains significant risk around the delivery of the budget, and our estimation is that there could be an overspend of up to £5 million in the policing budget for this financial year. Now, obviously, the service will do everything that it can to try and manage that position, but on the basis of that, as the Chief Constable set out earlier on, the Chief Constable wrote to the Accountable Officer setting out that position and seeking for the Accountable Officer to write to Scottish Government, which I think has now happened, for a £5 million allocation for a contingency to make sure that we do bring the budget in line with a revised budget if we were to secure that £5 million. But as I say, everything that we can do, we are doing, and the amount of effort across the organisation has been quite outstanding. The second point I would make is that £5 million in the context of the overall policing budget represents less than 0.4%. So even if we do come in slightly over, I wouldn't say that we're in a position where our finances are out of control. I think they're very well controlled. I think we're in unprecedented circumstances where we were in a situation where, having had a number of years of real terms protection, which to an extent I think was a recognition of the £200 million of annual savings that had been delivered through police reform in the early years, as a consequence of this second period of austerity that we're moving into, that commitment was dropped, and we had a real terms reduction in funding this year. Albeit it was an uplift in cash, but in the context of the pay awards, in the context of inflation, for us it was a real terms reduction, and what that meant was there was £50 million worth of savings built into the budget this year. Now, those £50 million worth of savings had to be devised, worked out in a period of 3 months from when the indicative budget allocation was announced last December and when the budget was set at the board in March. And at that point in time, we set out that the budget came with a level of risk that we hadn't seen in previous years as a consequence of the high level of savings that were required and the short notice in which they had to be implemented. And I think that is what's kind of been borne out through the year, where we have been looking for salami slice cuts. We've got a lot of one-off cuts in this budget that actually aren't going to help us into next year. They're just to help us get over the line this year. And a lot of organisational efforts for things that are not going to have any long-term benefit for us. And actually, when we come on to the next paper, part of the proposition that goes into government is in order to move out of this cycle that we're in into doing something that's far more strategic and forward-looking and delivers against the chief commitments that have been set out. So that's all I was going to say on revenue, but very quickly on capital. I would point out that we have spent £34.5 million on capital in the first half of this year, which represents 2/3 of the overall budget. Now, that is a massive move forward from where we've been previously. And again, looking to period 7, which was at the end of last month, that figure is getting on for nearly 3/4. In that sense, it's positive. In the sense where it's not so positive is that we know that our capital needs are far higher than the £50 million of funding that we have. And what that has meant is that we've had to now tell all parts of the organisation where there are not commitments made to stop spending. So we find ourselves in the month of November not being able to commit to spending any more capital, and that the £30 million of additional capital that we know we need to spend but we don't have funding for, we are now going to have to push into the next financial year, and that obviously just builds up. It has a snowball effect, because now that we're demonstrating the ability to spend capital and starting to show how we do and demonstrate how we do need more, we don't have it, so it's building up a problem for us. So that instruction has gone out across the organisation that no new commitments, and all that we're doing now is just taking delivery and finishing off works for things that have already been ordered, and that will mean that you'll see a very, very sharp tailing off in capital expenditure now for the rest of the financial year to make sure that we don't overspend our allocation. And then finally, on reform, we are forecasting that we will come in slightly under budget, but that is to offset a small forecast overspend on the revenue of 0.9 million, and when you take the two together, that's why we were saying we were in a forecast break-even position. Finally, on the bottom right-hand side of the dashboard, you'll see the cash flow management. You'll see that the balances that we hold at month end are fairly consistent. We spend over £100 million a month, and we work very closely with government in our cash flow forecasting to make sure that we don't hold excessive amounts of cash, but also to make sure that we have sufficient cash to cover our liabilities as they fall due. And that 8.4 million in September there is something like 2 days, just over 2 days worth of spend for the service, so we don't hold large cash balances. But I'll pause there, Chair, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to come to Grant McRae to give us a short update on your views of the committee.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, James, for your very clear explanation of the various issues that are in play. I think the mitigating actions tracker slide is actually a very good indication of the number of different actions that are in hand that have to be delivered in the course of the current financial year. And as James has mentioned, some of them, if you can't do them this year, they are being pushed into next year and beyond. So close monitoring of what's happening on each of these is essential, and we're now having monthly meetings to monitor the progress going on, rather than just waiting for the individual regular reporting coming to the Resources Committee. We're very comfortable there is a significant grip over this the whole finances, whether it be revenue, capital or reform, and we don't doubt that deliverability will remain critical until the savings are actually, or deferral are actually realised, or we've managed to find a way of building the various actions required into next year's budget. But I would commend the finance team for the work that is being done at the moment. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the key things is deliverability from an operational perspective, which I think that is key. So that's all I was going to say.
Thanks very much. As you all know, on the 28th of September, our last board meeting, we had a very intense discussion about the forecast overspend. It was a difficult meeting for all of us to be in. And I'd reflect what Grant says and what James Gray is saying is the difference between now and then has been quite dramatic. But I also want to hear, just before I open up, a little bit more, not just about the financial. This is not about spreadsheets. This is also about operational policing. So I understand Chief Constable's got a hard lean in on about overtime, which is one of the concerns at the 28th. And I'd like to know a little bit more about how you managed to tackle that and what action you've taken and any impact on operational policing. We did hear earlier from DCC Connors about the requirement to responding to incidents through our public order team actually has a very significant impact on officers who are held in reserve and then may moving across the country, but also on the costs as they're held quite a long time and often on evenings. So not a long, but I would like a little bit more on that lean in to the key issue for the board, which was overtime.
Thank you, Chair. Just to recognise, before I respond to that, in terms of the work that's accelerated by the whole team in reversing or bringing back the potential overspend, good, strong collaboration across all of the teams, and trying to get the impact across a very large organisation, and clearly there's often a delay in terms of decision to actually impact on the front line. I'll bring Alan in a minute because he's led the work in terms of the real hard scrutiny in relation to the overtime. And of course, in any organisation, once you put some focus on an area, you do get a quick return. But I would just like to add, this hasn't come, and Alan will give some of the detail, it hasn't come without some consequence in relation to the overtime. So, you know, there will be, he will have driven changes in working practices and better resource utilisation. But this was a relatively blunt approach to bringing the finances under control. And that obviously leads to our next paper in terms of we are going to have to redesign and reshape the organisation so that we can live within our means and meet all of the requirements from the public. But I'll pass on to Alan in terms of a bit of the detail. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair and Chief. First and foremost, we set up an oversight management group and we meet and we scrutinise the overtime spend on a fortnightly basis. I think one of the first things we wanted to do was about getting business areas to deliver within their budget. It was not about eradicating overtime spend. So the first thing I did was increased the authority levels around approvals for overtime. I looked at business areas that were maybe non-operational and we did pause all overtime spend within those types of areas. A big part of this is about empowering line managers to make decisions on key operational matters, and I think where we have made some significant progress with DCC Connors' support is around events and protests. So ensuring that we would deliver those events with a proportionate policing response and look at ways in which we can manoeuvre resources across the country, and we've done that incredibly successful. Yeah, we've had some challenges within protests, but we've been able to move resource from the west to the east and to the east to the north. So it's really about that grip. It's then about looking at what is good practice in different divisional areas and ensuring where we do spend overtime it's on a prioritised basis. It's certainly does impact on some of the duties that we're asking our operational officers to do, but we have made significant progress in a short period of time, and really indebted to the support from our colleagues within finance and supporting that. I think one of the big decisions I made with the Chief's support and others around the table was around training. So we know the position with the recruitment of new officers, but actually the pause around training for me was never about saving money. It was about ensuring that officers could stay within their own local policing divisions and support the demand over December and January. That equates for us to something like 3,600 officers training that they're not undertaking. So some of those training days were 2 hours, some were a week, and at the same time I've then taken the training staff out of the college and deployed them into operational duties. So it's about joining all that up and looking at those opportunities, and I'm confident over the next few months that will continue to pay some dividends.
Thank you very much. That's very clear. I'm going to come to Caroline, and I'm going to have to move on. Time's of the essence. Caroline.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, James, for your report. I just wanted to touch briefly on the capital. So it's always been a desire to move capital from being the Q4 rush into a more planned project, and I'm delighted to see that this year that's happened and we've managed to get capital spent earlier in the year. I just wanted your assurance, really, that we're going to continue that approach, because as resources get more constrained, having projects in the pipe that we can then decide on priorities is going to be really important. So thanks.
I can make that commitment that we will continue with that approach. The one caveat around that is that if we continue not to get the level of capital funding that we need, we're going to be in a stop-start situation, which is slightly disruptive, and it does make it a bit more difficult. But our approach will be to do that as much as we possibly can.
Thank you. My apologies to Jane Ryder. She had submitted a question to me. Jane.
Thank you, Chair, but actually James Gray covered it completely in his first sentence. I was wondering how we got from 18.9 only down to 7.7 at the date as at the report, but you've explained how you're going to be balanced or possibly relying on the 5 million contingency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. I would like to move on, if that's okay, to item 9.2, which is the budget proposal for next year. And before I invite James, this has been extraordinarily well rehearsed through operational meetings, through our joint meetings together, and through the Resources Committee. It's actually been probably the best rehearsed part of this agenda in the public domain too. So I'd like you to give your assessment and recommendation to us, and I'm going to come to Grant as well, and his committee have been through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, as you say, it's been well rehearsed, so I'll be brief in my comments. I mean, fundamentally, what we have tried to do is build a proposition for funding next year to government that tries to balance the organisational ambition, delivering against the Chief Constable's commitments, but in the context of the current state of public finances. And as everybody's aware, when you look at the economy with low growth, record or very high levels of UK national debt, high levels of taxation, change in demographics where increasingly there's pressure into health and social care, the public finance picture is incredibly challenging, and that's obviously been reflected in some of the comments that the Chief Constable was referring to earlier from the Deputy First Minister, the Cabinet Secretary for Justice and the Auditor General, amongst others. So hearing that and understanding that we're going into a second wave of austerity, and the ask of government that public bodies look to reform, we are not in the position that many other public bodies are in the ability to do that through looking at organisational structures. The first wave of austerity, going back 10 years, that was obviously dealt with in a policing context from the merger of the organisations, and that's how £200 million annually was able to be taken out of the policing budget in Scotland without damaging the service. And in actual fact, over a period of time, we've seen an increase in quality in service. Now, we can't take out another £200 million, and I think that's been said on a number of occasions. But as the Chief said earlier on, the proposition here is that we would like to move and redesign, resize, reshape the organisation to make it something that's affordable and sustainable into the future. But to do that, it takes time. You can't just flick the switch and do it overnight. And we saw that, as I said in the previous item, that when you've got 3 months' notice, you end up knee-jerking into salami slicing. So the proposition, and it's set out on slide 3 around the funding requirement that they ask, if you like, for next year, in total is £128 million. And what that would allow us to do would be to maintain the organisation into the next financial year, to buy us some time to do that planning work in order to look to redesign the organisation into the future and to be able to ride out this wave of austerity that's coming in our direction. And the 4 key components of that £128 million at the top left is revenue, so that's £74.5 million. Now, it's important to understand that £74.5 million does not represent any growth. There'll be no additionality. That is just the base level of money that is required to maintain the service as it is, to maintain 16,600 police officers for the next financial year, in order to give us that bit of stability and allow us to take our organisational effort away from salami slicing budgets, a lot of effort for very little reward, to actually focusing our organisational effort into doing something more strategic that will set us up better into the future. At the top right, it's looking for an uplift in capital, again reflecting the fact that we are heavily under-resourced in capital, and for a national police service we really need to move that dial upwards, and the ask is to increase it by £26.4 million next year, which will allow us to increase our capabilities such as body-worn video, but actually ultimately over a period of time, and we've said this before, we should be looking to something like £100 million a year as a minimum, given the scale of the asset base that we have and what we continue to need to develop. And then on the bottom right, there is an ask for additional funding for reform. It had been cut from £25 million to £20 million this year. We are asking for that to be reinstated, to give us that additional capacity to invest in this planning in order to develop that map for the future. And then in the bottom right, it's to ask for an allocation of funding to allow us to reshape the workforce, which obviously would be subject to consultation if we were to get there, but it's to give us that ability to do that in the next financial year. But I'll pause there, Chair, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, very clear. Grant?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, James, for a very clear articulation of the ask. It's been gone into in some considerable detail, both by the Budget Working Party, but also and considered in detail at the Resources Committee. As the Chief Constable has mentioned earlier, there's an element of you need to spend the SAVE programme in there, and it needs to be pump-primed to make things happen. They can't just happen overnight. So this plan reflects not only what we feel we need to do just now, but also taking account to very much plan for an efficient, reshaped and resized organisation going forward. And the Resources Committee commends the budget to the Board for approval.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any questions or comments? Mary.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. I wonder, Chief Constable, if you could tell us what the public and communities could expect to see if the requests in the submission are approved, if you get a positive response, and conversely what the public and communities could expect to see from policing if the response is not positive, if the funding isn't forthcoming.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. So the ask in relation to the coming financial year is that we are able to reshape the organisation so that we can live within our means, and at the same time consider how we redesign and reform quite considerable parts of the organisation in terms of workforce that hasn't been the focus to date, because there have been other priorities, particularly around creating national capabilities so that we can respond to the high threat and harm areas of business. But there are opportunities in relation to economies of scale, moving from the local to the national, consistent national ways of working. And as I said earlier on, some of the technology that we've adopted will now allow us to integrate some of our functions, particularly not the best descriptor, but in the middle to back office. Now, that's not to say that those areas of business are not important. They are important. But what the board and the public need to be assured is that we are delivering those functions that support frontline policing, but we're delivering them so they offer value for money, they're efficient, and they offer the best return on the investment in policing. I'm confident that we can move at pace through the next 12 months with this financial ask and bring about those improvements, the change of shape, particularly in those areas of business. There's an element of this is about transformation and use of technology, and there's an element around continuous improvement and being innovative in the way in which we deliver our services, and that we do so that you can hold us to account in terms of, is that the leanest way of delivering those services, and there's some mechanisms and some levers within there that we need to use in order to bring about this reshape and this reform. And more broadly, we're in a position that we can consider what's the right workforce mix moving forward. For various reasons, we've been fixed at a police officer number. Technology is advanced. We're policing not only in the space of communities, but we're policing crimes being committed online. That is a different workforce. And we want to be in a position that we get the right workforce mix. So we've got the right people, and that we're doing it as efficiently as we can. In response to the other end or the other part of the question, experience tells me that we will move, without this investment, we will move to a very reactive organisation. And the engagement and the presence and the proactivity is the area of business that that diminishes over time when an organisation hasn't got the headroom to flex and change and reshape. And we're very much in response mode, and there's a number of dangers in relation to that.
Yes, that's very clear. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so I omitted to thank James you for the dramatic turnaround from our 10th board meeting on the 28th of September, through fantastic collaborative work through the finance team, through the senior officers, and indeed our own regular meetings with grants committee to track that progress. So I thank all of you very much for that. As you say, I think you said 0.04, but maybe it's 0.04. Okay, thank you very much. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I think I sort of test your mental arithmetic, and maybe you can't answer this. If we had received real terms protection this year and into next year, what would be the difference in our budget? Because this year we didn't receive real protection, and we undertook, I think, one of the most underrated and dramatic issues. We reduced police officer numbers to 16,600. And I believe that's taken for granted. And that was a conversation I had so often with the previous Chief Constable and with the then Cabinet Secretary, how we moved that, kept Scotland safe. So that was a major reform which hasn't really been given enough airtime. So I don't know if you've got enough time by my rambling here to give me and if you can't give it, would you just write to me and say, because essentially what I want is the advocacy question. We didn't receive this year real times protection, and then we had to make a significant adjustment in officers, which has been commented on around the policing family, including our staff association, the Federation, and the Superintendents Association. So if we know what we're asking now of government, and this is an ask which is the compromise ask between us. It's a collegiate and jointly advocated ask between us, and that's why it's taken some time. If we approve this, which I hope we will do, that's quite clear, But I want to know if that commitment to real terms protection, which was a commitment, had been maintained, what would the figure this year look like compared to our ask? Now, I don't know if that's enough time for you to exercise your mental arithmetic, or where you're going to come back to me. Over to you.
I think I will come back to you to formalise it, but I think it would probably be somewhere. I'm thinking about 70. If we would have needed about another 70 on what we got. If we'd had that in the allocation at the start of this financial year, we would have been able to manage the pay award as it was, and so on. But as I say, I'll write to you to confirm that.
If you would, it's not a killer detail, but I think I need in my advocacy to say we are trying to be both completely consistent with the ambitions of the Cabinet Secretary for Finance of public service reform. We want to be consistent with the investment to save. We want to not over-ask for issues to make life easier. We've got efficiencies to gain. And the recent policing productivity report is good in this sense. It actually finally contains some benchmarking figures, something which I have been exasperated in Scotland not to have the benchmarking figures. That's going to be a guide star for us all about productivity in there. So that was my question to you. If you write back to me, thank you very much. I won't test you again about your mental. Thank you. Are there any other comments for your and my sincere apologies, Chief Executive comment. Yeah.
I think James should have said, do you mean revenue or capital? It's never straightforward, so you'll probably get both, Chair, on that. But I'd like to say, if I may, this is my 5th budget, which surprises me, and I know James will have done many more. And what is always really clear is the clarity that James and his team present a 1.4 billion budget on a few pages, and that this authority can understand right away what the issues are and what decisions have to be taken. But what is different this year, from my perspective, and it's because I would say it's a joint leadership approach in Police Scotland, is that it's very clear what the proposition is, it's clear what the benefits are if we get that proposition, it's clear the consequences if we don't, and also, for the first time, we've got an operating environment. We actually get figures around the operating environment at a very high level, but very simple to understand. So, from my perspective as AO, I think this document is actually best practice, how you present such a complex scenario to a government.
Thank you. I think it addresses the issues of Audit Scotland, looking broadly at public service reform, public sector reform, which has been emphasised many times over the past. There has been dramatic reform in fire service and dramatic reform in policing, less dramatic or no in other areas, firstly. And does it address the Cabinet Secretary of Finance demand for reform, which are about the transformation of public service?
From my perspective, yes. One of the things Police Scotland has never ever been criticised for is not reforming, in terms of all the reports we've had from Audit Scotland. So, and this is saying we've done it, this is what we can do again. You need to help us, buy time for us, and we will deliver. I don't know what's happening across other public sector bodies. I understand it is not as robust in terms of that proposition. So I think it's exactly in line with what the Auditor General is saying, what the Criminal Justice Committee is saying. I think the Finance Committee as well of the Parliament is saying that. So absolutely, as I said, in 10 pages, it's setting out exactly what's required for public sector reform.
Thank you very much indeed, Chief Executive. If there are no other questions, can I conclude the meeting? We don't have to approve that budget, all right?
I think we've submitted it, so you're sort of...
Well, there you go.
Sorry, Chair. Your retrospective approval, thank you very much.
Well, let me ask a question. Are there any amendments the board would like to make to that budget that are within reason? No, if not. Well, that concludes our meeting, the Chief Constable's first meeting. And to my critics on the board who insist it's on time, 3 minutes early to my time. So thank you very much, and we're going to take a break now, and the board will reconvene with the appropriate officers and staff of Police Scotland